Kenichi is a solitary, middle-aged office worker trapped in the monotony of a dead-end desk job. On a seemingly ordinary workday, he overdoes it on his go-to-energy drink, leading to his collapse and loss of consciousness. This alarming health incident becomes the wake-up call he desperately needed to make a drastic change. He decides to quit his job and leave his old life behind, relocating to the countryside to embrace a dull, simple existence as a farmer, settling in an unattractive cabin. One quiet afternoon, as he's in the middle of preparing lunch, something completely unexpected occurs. He's abruptly transported to an expansive, unfamiliar forest, feeling bewildered and uneasy. Kenichi scans his surroundings, his heart racing when his eyes fall upon the skeleton of an ancient knight, its armor pierced by a sword still lodged in its chest. Overwhelmed and alarmed, Kenichi glances around, trying to process his predicament and wondering how he's ever going to get out of this bizarre situation. Then, remembering an anime he once watched where the protagonist used a status bar in a similar scenario, he decides to try the same thing. To his amazement, a glowing status screen appears, displaying all his current stats. This is the moment Kenichi realizes he's in another world. Kenichi quickly adapts to the system, learning how it works. He discovers it allows him to store and retrieve items effortlessly, a feature he finds incredibly useful. Moments later, hunger strikes. The system offers him the option to buy food and water, but it comes at a price he can't afford since he's broke. Frustrated, he wonders what to do next. Kenichi soon stumbles upon the system's trading feature, allowing him to exchange valuable items for supplies. However, he quickly realizes there's nothing in his immediate surroundings to offer for trade. His gaze shifts back to the knight's skeleton, and his eyes lock onto the sword lodged in its chest. With no other options, he decides to use the sword for a trade. The system accepts the weapon, granting him 2 cartons of milk and some bread in return. After satisfying his hunger, Kenichi uses the leftover trade points to buy a shovel. With it, he carefully buries the knight's remains, offering a prayer of gratitude for the meal and the sword that helped him survive. Next, he buys a bike and begins exploring the area, knowing he needs to find a settlement and earn money quickly. Kenichi spends the rest of the day gathering items and trades them in for food and utensils. As night falls, he prepares a curry meal, ready to finally enjoy it, when a pack of black forest foxes starts creeping toward him. Fear grips him as he scrambles for a solution. Searching through his system, the only thing he can find is a box of fireworks. He throws them at the foxes, but they don't work. Panicking, he keeps looking until he discovers a slingshot with unlimited ammo. He fires a few shots, successfully scaring off the foxes. Relieved but shaken, Kenichi jumps on his bike and gets the hell out of there as fast as he can. The next morning, Kenichi finds himself at the edge of the forest, mentally preparing to face whatever challenges this strange new world has in store. Determined to find a way out, he resumes exploring the area. Using his system, he decides to purchase a stepladder and a pair of binoculars. Climbing up with the ladder, he scans the horizon through the binoculars and spots the walls of a city in the distance. This sight fills him with a glimmer of hope, as he believes reaching the city might provide him with an opportunity to earn money and start figuring things out. With newfound determination, Kenichi pushes his way through the dense weeds, moving as quickly as he can toward the city. Along the way, Kenichi reaches a crossroad and narrowly avoids being hit by a speeding carriage. The carriage stops in front of him, belonging to a young, blonde-haired merchant named Fayu, who feels bad about the near accident. Noticing the heavy rain, Fayu offers Kenichi a ride to the city free of charge. Kenichi climbs into the carriage and notices another passenger inside. Fayu explains that she is just a traveling bard and fellow traveler. As they continue their journey, Fayu observes that Kenichi's attire and name are unusual. Curious, he asks Kenichi what brings him to the city of Dahlia. Suspecting that he's not a local, Kenichi brushes off the question, simply stating that he's heading there for business purposes. Before long, they reach the city gates. Kenichi lends Fayu a hand unloading boxes from the carriage. and in return, Fayu hands him a small pouch as payment for the ride. Curious, Kenichi opens the pouch and discovers it's filled with pepper. His expression turns serious as Fayu cautions him about openly carrying spices. Fayu explains that the Spice Syndicate holds a strict monopoly over spices, making it risky to possess them without proper connections. Despite the warning, Fayu offers to buy the pepper from Kenichi, but Kenichi insists on gifting it to him. Fayu, however, refuses, stating that as a merchant, he's happy to get things cheaply but won't take anything for free. After handing Kenichi 3 silver pieces in exchange for the pepper, Fayu climbs back onto his carriage and continues on his way. Kenichi looks at the silver coins in disbelief. Realizing how much they're worth in yen, he's shocked by their value and feels a newfound sense of fortune. With money in hand, his next priority is finding a place to sleep. He heads to an inn, where he meets the attendant, a woman named Azalea. She greets him and guides him to the service counter, explaining the available rooms and payment methods. After paying for a room, Azalea asks Kenichi to write his name in the guest register. It's at this moment that he realizes he doesn't know how to read or write in this world's language. Feeling embarrassed, Kenichi explains his predicament to Azalea. She listens carefully before offering a word of caution, pointing out that the Merchants Guild will never accept him as a registered merchant if he struggles with fundamental skills like reading and writing. Kenichi quickly clarifies that he's fully capable of reading, writing, and even performing mathematical calculations, but he admits he cannot do so in this nation's writing system. To verify his claim, Azalea decides to test him with a math question. To her surprise, Kenichi answers it effortlessly. Satisfied that he possesses the essential skills, she guides him through writing his name in the register. Afterward, Kenichi asks if she can teach him how to read and write in the nation's language, offering her some candy as a reward. Excited by the offer, Azalea immediately agrees. As they talk, Kenichi learns that the land he's in is the Kingdom of Kadon, a nation governed by a hierarchical system with nobles and a king. Kenichi spends most of the night with Azalea, discovering that the country's language isn't too different from his native Japanese. Lying on the bed with a faint blush, Azalea is impressed by how quickly Kenichi picks it up, confidently concluding that he'll do well as a merchant. While Azalea takes a moment to rest, Kenichi, feeling a bit bored, decides to sketch a portrait of her. When he shows her the drawing, she's astonished by how lifelike it appears. Remembering all the kindness Kenichi has shown her so far, Azalea blushes deeply once more and gently pulls him onto the bed to thank him in her own way. Later that day, Kenichi goes downstairs to the guild center, where he meets the receptionist. She hands him a handwritten registration form to fill out. He's initially confused about why it's handwritten, but then realizes they haven't developed printing technology yet. After filling out his details, he returns the form to the receptionist, who validates it. However, she informs him that the guild registration fee is 1 silver piece, roughly 50,000 yen. The thought of this makes Kenichi sigh heavily because he knows he doesn't have money like that. He asks if he can pay in installments, and the receptionist agrees, giving him a sense of relief. She then hands him his guild card, a simple metal piece with a crystal embedded at its center. The following day, Kenichi heads to the market, conversing with various merchants to gather information on the prices of goods and explore potential profitable opportunities. Later, back at the inn, he decides to improve his living space by constructing a more comfortable bed. Azalea observes him from afar, impressed by his carpentry skills and the care he puts into his work. As she continues to watch Kenichi diligently working on his project, her attention is drawn to the sturdy and uniquely designed clothespins he's using. Curious, she approaches him and asks if she could buy a few, mentioning that the thin clothespins she typically uses tend to break easily. Her remark sparks an idea in Kenichi's mind, and he begins to realize that these clothespins might have the potential to become a profitable product. The following day, Kenichi decides to set up a stand at a local market to sell these clothespins. The stand next to his is run by a woman named Anama. Shortly after he opens for business, Anama comes over to buy a few clothespins from him. Kenichi seems surprised by her interest, but Anama casually tells him there's no rule against stand neighbors buying from each other. With this interaction, they exchange introductions and strike up an acquaintance. Kanisha's clothespin business quickly turns into a massive success. On his very first day, he attracts a constant flow of customers. Much to his excitement, Anama shares in his joy, thanking him for the boost in foot traffic, as the crowd drawn to his stand has also brought more customers her way. Later, Kenichi takes some time to review his earnings. To his amazement, he discovers he's made a profit equivalent to over 15,000 yen in just one day, a considerable sum by the local standards. This achievement solidifies his belief that selling clothespins alone could provide him with a steady and sustainable livelihood. Just as he finishes his calculations, another customer approaches his stand, a tall blonde man with a sword on his hip, giving off the impression of someone important. The man browses the stand and eventually asks if Kenichi has any knives suitable for battle. Kenichi shows him a finely crafted blade, which the man inspects closely. Though it's a pristine weapon, something about it doesn't feel right. It's too short for his needs. The blonde man asks if Kenichi has anything larger. Kenichi nods and presents him with a tall broadsword. The man is immediately impressed, marveling at the quality and craftsmanship of the blade. He's eager to purchase it and asks for the price. Kenichi quotes 1 gold piece, but the blonde man hesitates, clearly feeling the price is steep. Despite this, he finds the sword so beautiful that he can't let it go. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted when a purple-haired catgirl appears out of nowhere and licks Kenichi's face. Startled by the unexpected gesture, Kenichi stumbles backward and falls to the ground. Noticing his shocked reaction, the blonde man observes silently for a moment before realizing that Kenichi has likely never encountered beastfolk before. He calmly explains to Kenichi that beings like the catgirl are a normal part of this world. Moments later, more beastfolk arrive and apologize for their sister's impulsive behavior. One of them climbs onto Kenichi's stand, grabs the cloth draped over it, and enthusiastically announces their intent to buy it. Kenichi initially tells them the cloth isn't for sale, but reconsiders upon seeing an opportunity to make money. He decides to sell the cloth for 9 pieces of copper, including a discount of 1 copper piece. The beastfolk, however, don't have the exact amount. Kenichi assures them it's fine and calculates the change they're owed. The beastfolk look at him suspiciously, unsure if they can trust his math. Just as tensions rise, the blonde man speaks up, confirming that Kenichi's calculations are accurate. Satisfied, the beastfolk hand over the money, take their cloth, and leave. The beastfolk aren't known to be the brightest when it comes to calculations, so it makes sense. The blonde man, impressed by Kenichi's honesty and ingenuity, ultimately decides to purchase the sword after all. Elsewhere in the city, a maid who purchased Kenichi's clothespins shows them to her master, Primula. Intrigued, Margaret asks if they could be used in the mansion, pointing out how much easier they would make the maid's chores. Primula agrees enthusiastically, suggesting they purchase more the following day. Taking the idea further, she envisions selling the clothespins through her own company, recognizing them as a potential gold mine. Excited by the opportunity, she rushes off to seek her father's permission to move forward with the plan. That evening, Kenichi is taking a bath by the well, wishing he could have a warm bath, but those haven't been invented yet. He decides he's going to have to make one himself. Looking through the store if there's anything he could use to make the hot bath, and he happens to find a barrel for sale and intends to fill it with water and put it over a fire so he can experience a hot bath again. If his idea works out, he thinks he might be able to make some profit from it. That aside, Kenichi has been benefiting a lot from his online store screen, but he has no idea how it actually works or how the packages even get to him in the first place. Honestly, it feels almost too good to be true, and Kenichi can't shake the worry that it might eventually demand his soul as payment. While his success with the clothespins has been encouraging, he finds himself pondering what new product he could develop to achieve similar results. However, no fresh ideas come to him. Frustrated, he gazes at the ceiling, his thoughts drifting to the bigger questions. For now, there's no point in dwelling on it, so Kenichi decides to call it a night and get some sleep. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, a young girl named Anemone is on the run. The following day, as Kenichi prepares his shop for the day, he decides to make some adjustments to his inventory. He adds some jewelry to his selection. While these aren't genuine gemstones of high value, they have an attractive appearance, which should help him turn a modest profit. At that moment, the maid from the previous day, Margaret, arrives, mentioning that she's there to purchase more clothespins from Kenichi. When he asks how many she needs, he's taken aback by her request for 100. However, since she has the money ready, he proceeds with the transaction. As Kenichi is packaging the clothespins for her, Margaret's attention shifts to the jewelry he has displayed. She inquires if they are made from real diamonds. Kenichi explains that the pieces are crafted from polished glass, but they still look quite appealing. Margaret then asks him to reserve one for her so she can return and purchase it later. The day continues as usual, but just as Kenichi is about to close up shop, the beast folk from the previous day return to his store. They appear quite serious, and Kenichi starts to worry that they might be there to rough him up. However, Miley steps in close to him and confidently tells the others that she can definitely smell spices on him. The rest of the beast folk start cheering and eagerly ask Kenichi to sell them some spices. Despite their enthusiasm, Kenichi hesitates. After hearing about the spice syndicate and not knowing how they operate or what they might do if they discover he's selling spices, he feels it's too risky. The beast folk continue to plead with him, hoping he'll make an exception, but the locals in the area step in, explaining that it's unreasonable to expect someone as new as Kenichi to jeopardize his business for them. Hearing this, the beast folk seem to understand and back down. Kenichi can't sell them any spices, but it technically won't be breaking any rules if he just shares a meal with them. So, he invites the group to come eat with him, but it's going to have to be out in the woods so he doesn't attract any negative attention. The beast folk are really happy to hear this. Later that night, they all meet Kenichi and Anama on the outskirts of town so they can begin cooking. Kenichi is about to begin cooking when Anama asks if she can help. He tells her to cut some of the veggies for him. However, when Anama takes a look at the veggies, she can't believe how vibrant and juicy they look. Kenichi explains that he got these from a foreign country and guarantees that they taste really good. While Kenichi and Anama are busy working on the vegetables, Miley and the other beast folk are down by the river, trying their hand at catching fish. Before long, they manage to catch a good amount. With all the ingredients ready, Kenichi starts preparing the fish, seasoning it with spices, and then tossing everything into a pot to cook. The result is a meal that the beast folk absolutely adore. They've never experienced flavors like this before and are incredibly grateful for the food. However, the delicious meal stirs up a strong craving for alcohol among them. Anama warns them to control themselves, reminding them that alcohol is quite expensive. But Kenichi doesn't see any harm in indulging them a little, so he pulls out a bottle of inexpensive booze and pours a few glasses for them. In return, he makes them promise that they'll never tell anyone about the meal he cooked for them. Anama warns Kenichi that he's being a little too generous, but he doesn't see anything wrong with letting the beast folk enjoy themselves, especially since they seem to be good people. That night, they drink together, bathe together, and eventually fall asleep under the stars. Miley seems to really like Kenichi now. The next morning, Kenichi returns to the inn, and Azalea is a bit upset since he was out all night. Kenichi tries to explain that he was just hanging out with a couple of beast folk outside town, but judging from the cat lady fur on his jacket, she thinks Kenichi did a lot more than just hang out, and she's mad he chose to do it with a cat lady instead of her. Later that day, as Kenichi is setting up his shop for another day of business, Margaret arrives with Primula to pay him a visit. Kenichi is momentarily captivated by Primula's beauty, but then he notices Margaret standing behind her and realizes they're probably here to buy the necklace Margaret had inquired about the day before. He retrieves the necklace, and Margaret pays for it before handing it over to Primula for inspection. Primula is so impressed by the craftsmanship that she finds it hard to believe the necklace isn't made of real diamonds. She then asks Kenichi if he has more necklaces like this in stock. In response, Kenichi retrieves several more pieces from his collection and brings them out for her to see. Primula is incredibly impressed by the quality of Kenichi's products, as well as the fact that he has an item box. She has a request to make of him. She tells him that she is the daughter of the owner of the Mallow Trading Company, and if Kenichi is willing to accompany her, she would like to introduce him to her father. Kenichi likes the idea of meeting with the owner of a major trading company, but he is hesitant to meet any big shots since it might spell trouble for him. him. However, Anama tells him that Primula's father is well known around town, and everyone says he's a man of good character. So, Kenichi doesn't have to worry about getting into trouble with him. Since that's the case, Kenichi agrees to go with Primula, and she invites him to join her in her carriage so they can go meet her father. On the way, Primula shows Kenichi some replicas of the clothespins she had made. While the wooden part was simple enough for her craftsman to replicate, the metal clamp proved too intricate for them to recreate. Kenichi understands why they struggled, since even he doesn't fully know how the springs are made, he just knows it's a complex process. Eventually, they arrive at Primula's home, and Kenichi is stunned by its enormous size. However, Primula casually mentions that, compared to the homes of other nobles in the area, hers is actually quite modest. They head inside, and Kenichi is introduced to Primula's father, Mallow. They both greet each other, and Mallow invites Kenichi to have a seat so they can begin their discussion. Once Kenichi is settled in, he shows Mallow some of the jewelry he has, and Mallow is just as impressed as Primula was. On top of that, Primula tells him that Kenichi possesses an item box, and Mallow finds this interesting because he also has one. His item box is what allowed him to build his trading company to this level in the first place, so if it's used properly, he thinks Kenichi could become quite successful. Although right now, Kenichi is just using it to store his supplies. The reason Mallow wanted to meet with Kenichi is to discuss the possibility of making Kenichi the official supplier for the Mallow company. Kenichi had anticipated a proposal like this and assumes Mallow's plan is to market the goods in a way that will maximize profits. However, Kenichi wonders why. If that's the goal, Mallow didn't just continue buying items from his shop at a low price and reselling them later. While Mallow could have done that, he explains it would be a dishonest business move, and if Kenichi ever discovered they were reselling his goods without permission, it would certainly upset him. Additionally, approaching Kenichi directly gives Mallow a strategic advantage over his competitors, who would likely try to strike a similar deal with him in the future. With that being said, Mallow would like to begin their partnership negotiations and offers to pay Kenichi 50% of the retail price for his goods. Kenichi could push for a better deal, but he's honestly okay with this since he's already making a ridiculous amount of profit from his online store. So, he accepts Mallow's offer and the two shake hands on it. He officially signs the supply contract, and the first few items he supplies Mallow with earn him over 1,000,000 yen worth of coins. However, when Primula sees all the beautiful jewels Kenichi has in stock, she falls in love with them and asks her father if she can just buy these ones from Kenichi for herself. Mallow sees no problem with that, so Primula offers to pay him 10 gold coins for them, which is equivalent to 2,000,000 yen. For the first time since he got here, Kenichi has an 8-figure bank balance. Since things are going so well for him, Kenichi decides it's time to start setting up his peaceful life and purchases a house from his store. The following day, he leaves the city walls and ventures into the forest to find a suitable spot for his new home. Before heading out, he mentioned his plan to Azalea so she wouldn't worry, though she found it odd that Kenichi would willingly choose to live in the dangerous forest instead of staying within the safety of the city. After finally finding a good location, Kenichi buys a weed whacker and begins clearing the area. However, he quickly encounters an issue. While most items from his store are reasonably priced, fuel is expensive no matter what world you're in. With no way around the high cost, Kenichi decides to just deal with it and continues working until he has successfully cleared a path for himself to move in and out of the forest. After that, he needs to start working on getting rid of all the trees. So, he buys a chainsaw and starts cutting. After several hours of hard work, Kenichi has finally managed to cut through a bunch of the trees in the area, so all that's left is to move them out of the way. However, when he tries to stuff the trees in his item box, it doesn't work. It looks like the trees are too long to fit, so he's going to have to bust out the chainsaw and cut them down into more manageable pieces. He eventually shortens the trees into 10-meter logs, and this way, he's able to fit them in his item box, so he's almost done with the tree removal. The only thing left to do is pull out all the tree stumps, but that's going to be a lot of work, and the sun is already setting, so he decides to come back and finish up tomorrow. The next day, Kenichi heads back to the forest to continue working, but after spending some time digging at the stump, he realizes the task is far too demanding for a middle-aged man like himself. Rather than risk injuring his back, he decides to buy a bulldozer instead. However, as soon as he sees it, he's hit with the realization realization that he just spent 1.2 million yen on heavy machinery simply to avoid manual labor. He feels a bit of regret about the splurge, but at the same time, the thought of not having to strain himself makes him wonder if it was actually a smart investment. He starts up the bulldozer's engine, only to discover that it runs on diesel, and his store doesn't sell diesel at all. This throws him into a panic, as the thought of wasting so much money on something he can't even use is overwhelming. He thinks for a second and realizes he could probably make his own diesel if he mixes kerosene and some additives. But when he's about to try it out, he realizes he could destroy the bulldozer's engine if he gets the proportions of the mixture wrong. So, just to be safe, he decides to test out his mixture on a diesel generator first. After filling it up, he tries turning it on, and it seems to work fine, so he knows his homemade diesel will work with the bulldozer. He intends to return tomorrow to finish the job. In the meantime, he needs to do something about all the bugs out here, so the next day, he decides to head to a local magic shop to buy some bug-repellent magic stones. As Kenichi steps into the shop, the wizard who owns it greets him and asks where he's from. Noting that he hasn't seen him around before, Kenichi explains that he's a foreigner who recently opened a shop in town and has come by to purchase some bug-repellent stones. The wizard informs him that the stones cost 3 silver coins, which is quite pricey. Hoping to negotiate, Kenichi offers the wizard 2 oranges in exchange for lowering the price. Since the wizard has never seen oranges before, he assumes they must be a rare and exotic fruit and agrees to give Kenichi a discount because of the trade. Later that day, Kenichi has a conversation with Anama, who mentions that the wizard is incredibly knowledgeable and someone worth having as a friend, essentially the complete opposite of the wanted criminal Shaga, whose posters are displayed all over town. As the leader of a notorious bandit group, Shaga has a substantial bounty on his head. That very night, he orchestrates a raid on a carriage transporting slaves, leaving everyone wondering what he plans to do with them. The following day, Kenichi returns to the forest, eager to finally put his bulldozer to use. Any regrets about the purchase vanish as he realizes how much easier it's making his work, and it's surprisingly fun to operate. With this, nothing stands in the way of his dream of living a peaceful life in the woods. However, after spending so much on the bulldozer, his finances are nearly drained, forcing him to pause any further construction for the time being. A little while later, Kenichi meets up with Mallow and Primula again, hoping to sell them some salt and sugar for a decent profit. Mallow tries the sugar and is impressed by its quality, but unfortunately, he can't buy it from Kenichi. The state holds exclusive rights to the trade of sugar and salt, meaning Mallow would face serious trouble if he purchased it from an unlicensed source. On the upside, though, the jewels Kenichi sold to Mallow earlier are flying off the shelves, so Mallow is eager to buy more right away. The additional jewels Kenichi sells this time earn him 15 gold coins, equivalent to roughly 3 million yen. With this newfound wealth, Kenichi finally has enough money to buy the log cabin he spotted in his store. He's still amazed that the store even sells entire cabins, and for just 1.7 million yen, no less. It almost feels too good to be true. But Kenichi isn't about to pass up the opportunity, so he goes ahead and purchases the log cabin. Unfortunately, the cabin seems to have been sourced from Walmart, because as soon as Kenichi purchases it, he's buried under a mountain of wooden planks and a set of instructions that make no sense to him. He takes a moment to manually read through the instructions, and just as he feared, assembling the cabin is going to be an enormous headache. However, since he's already paid for it, he has no choice but to push through and get it done. As Kenichi starts working on the construction, the beast folk he helped earlier happen to pass by, and as a gesture of gratitude, they decide to lend him a hand with the build. Several weeks pass, and with the help of the beast folk, Kenichi manages to make consistent progress on building his log cabin while still running his stall. After just under a month of hard work, the cabin is finally finished. Kenichi knows he couldn't have completed it so quickly without the beast folk's assistance, so to show his gratitude, he throws a barbecue party for them. However, even though the cabin itself is done, Kenichi still has a long list of tasks to handle on his own, like painting the walls and roof and setting up electricity. It takes him another month to sort out all the essentials, but once everything is in place, Kenichi's home becomes completely self-sufficient. He builds a fence fence around his house and farm, and for electricity, he installs a couple of solar panels. With his dream home finally complete, the first thing Kenichi does to celebrate is enjoy a nice warm bath, though he still needs to figure out how to install indoor plumbing, as it took several bike trips to fill up the bath. The next morning, Kenichi heads to the inn to let Azalea know that he's finished building his forest cabin and won't be staying at the inn anymore. Azalea is a bit surprised, as she didn't think Kenichi was serious when he mentioned wanting to build a house in the forest. Still, she's happy for him and proud that he achieved one of his goals, even if it means she won't get to see him as often anymore. The following day, Kenichi wakes up in his cabin, and with the weather being so beautiful, he decides to head out and take photos of the local flowers. However, his peaceful outing is abruptly interrupted when an arrow whizzes past him, nearly hitting him. Startled, Kenichi tumbles off his bike, but the attack doesn't stop. More arrows are fired, forcing him to take cover behind a tree. The culprits turn out to be a group of new beast folk living in the forest. They explain that they were out hunting and instinctively attacked him, mistaking him for a threat. However, even after realizing that Kenichi is the human who built a cabin in the forest, they remain hostile and decide to kill him anyway. Kenichi has no idea why these beast folk are attacking him, but he's not about to sit back and let them do as they please. He reaches into his inventory, pulls out his slingshot, and fires back. The beast folk, caught off guard by the fact that the seemingly weak human is fighting back, start to second-guess their actions. When Kenichi escalates by throwing fireworks at them and pulling out his excavator, they decide they have no interest in sticking around to find out what it's capable of and quickly flee. Left puzzled by the whole ordeal, Kenichi suddenly hears a wounded animal crying out in pain near the base of a tree. The poor creature has been shot in the leg and likely won't survive much longer unless Kenichi acts fast. Kenichi cautiously approaches the injured cat, but it snarls at him, clearly not trusting his intentions. Not wanting to risk getting bitten, he spends a little money to buy some cushion armor as a precaution. However, as he starts removing the arrow, the cat barely resists. It seems to have run out of stamina. This makes it much easier for Kenichi to treat its injuries. He purchases a bottle of alcohol to disinfect the wound and then applies some antibiotic cream. While the immediate wounds have been treated, there's no guarantee the cat will survive if left out in the wild. So Kenichi decides to bring it back to his house. Kenichi sets up a blanket for the cat to rest on, but it still hasn't moved an inch since he treated it, which makes him start to worry. He hasn't seen any veterinarians in this town, but he figures there might be some kind of healing magic he can use, so he decides to consult the wizard. After listening to Kenichi's story, the wizard deduces that the animal he found is likely a bobcat. However, the wizard doesn't see the point in trying to heal it, suggesting that Kenichi could just kill it and sell its fur for a decent profit. Realizing the wizard isn't going to be of much help, Kenichi heads back outside. As he does so, Miley happens to be passing by, so she jumps on him and starts sniffing around. She smells the scent of a bobcat on him, and her people see bobcats as messengers of God, so she's really excited and wants to see it for herself. She follows Kenichi back to his house, and as soon as she sees the bobcat, she can already tell that its injury was caused by the dog beast folk, so she swears to make them pay. In the meantime, the bobcat seems to be doing a bit better, but it keeps trying to lick its wound, so Kenichi is forced to stick a cone on its head. Miley is impressed by Kenichi's skill in providing healthcare and asks if he's a doctor, but he modestly replies that he only knows some basic first aid. Wanting to thank him for saving the bobcat, Miley heads outside and does a bit of quick hunting, bringing back some bird meat as a gift. Kenichi grills it for their dinner, and after they eat, Miley, feeling exhausted, asks if she can stay the night. Kenichi questions whether it's okay for her to abandon her work to stay, but Miley insists that she's more concerned about the bobcat than her responsibilities at the moment. Kenichi agrees to let her stay, but since he only has one bed, Miley suggests they share it. Later that night, Miley somehow ends up on top of Kenichi. A few days later, the cat is looking much healthier, so Kenichi decides it's it's time to start working on his farm. While he can easily purchase the seedlings and tools he needs, the issue of water still poses a challenge. Running down to the river every time he needs to water his crops would be far too inconvenient. His first thought is to construct a well with a pump, but he decides to leave that task for another day since he's too exhausted to tackle it now. That night, he heads to bed, only to wake up the next morning to the bobcat jumping on his stomach. Although it's a bit painful, Kenichi is glad to see the bobcat so full of energy. Feeling confident in its recovery, he removes its cone and releases it back into the wild to live freely. Now back to that well matter. Kenichi decides to take a few days off from running his stall so he can get to work on it. He drills a hole in the ground and installs an electric pump, so he now has access to fresh water whenever he needs it. To celebrate, he starts filling up his bath so he can take a soak, but all of a sudden, he hears Primula call out to him. He's surprised to see her here, so Primula explains that he didn't open his shop today, so she got a little worried, and Miley told her about his log cabin, so she decided to visit him. She's impressed that Kenichi was able to build all of this on his own, but then she notices the giant excavator next to his house, so she asks him about it. Kenichi doesn't want to have to explain how that thing works, so he just says it's his summon familiar to keep it simple. Primula totally believes him, but now she thinks Kenichi can do magic, so he asks her to keep this a secret when she gets back home. At this time of day, the city gates are likely already closed, meaning Primula won't be able to return home. She's fully aware of that, which is why she plans to spend the night at Kenishi's place. Even when Kenichi points out that he only has one bed, she insists that it's not an issue. Noticing the barrel behind him, she asks what it's for, and Kenichi explains that it's a hot bath. Excited by the idea, Primula asks if she can try it out. By nightfall, Kenichi heats up the bath, and Primula eagerly gets in, enjoying the soothing warmth. However, being out in the middle of the woods starts to make her feel uneasy, so she calls out to Kenichi. He reassures her that he's sitting just on the other side of the wall, but Primula says she'd feel more comfortable if she could see him face to face. After finishing her bath, Kenichi hands Primula a bathrobe to change into. She falls in love with how warm and cozy it feels and immediately asks if she can buy it from him. Kenichi initially says it's not for sale, but after her persistent pleading, he agrees to sell her a couple of bathrobes. Later, he gives her a nightgown to wear for bed, and Primula is amazed by the variety of high-quality items Kenichi has in his possession. She confidently tells him that he could easily become the greatest merchant in the kingdom if he set his mind to it. However, Kenichi explains that he has no interest in such an ambition, as it would only attract unwanted attention from the local nobles and create unnecessary trouble. All he wants is to live a peaceful life and earn enough money to stay comfortable. Hearing this, Primula promises to do whatever she can to help him maintain his quiet, simple lifestyle. A little while later, they go to bed, but Kenichi doesn't want a repeat of what happened with Miley, so he decides to just buy a second bed for Primula for the night to avoid any funny business. Meanwhile, over in the outlaws' camp, Shaga seems to have received a job from someone really important, so this could spell trouble in the future. The next morning, Kenichi takes Primula back home, and while he's there, he decides to talk with Mallow about those bathrobes Primula asked about. Mallow is intrigued by the strange fabric, so he thinks it will sell really well. And since they are on the topic, Kenichi decides to bring up the possibility of selling something a little more spicy. Primula certainly seems interested, but Mallow shuts that idea down immediately. Just then, Margaret enters the room to deliver the ledgers Mallow had requested. Noticing Kenichi's curiosity, Mallow explains that he's in the middle of rewriting the old ledgers because the Empire recently introduced a brilliant new system for tracking sales, double-entry bookkeeping. Kenichi is stunned, as the double-entry system was a standard practice back in Japan. This reminds him of something Mallow had mentioned earlier about the Empire's rapid growth being driven by the inventions of a certain man. As it happens, Mallow was just about to test one of this man's latest inventions, which, to Kenichi's surprise, turns out to be a pitcher pump. This revelation only heightens Kenichi's suspicions, creating something as advanced as a pitcher pump would require prior knowledge, strongly suggesting that someone else from Japan may have been sent to this world. Kenichi feels slightly uneasy, realizing he might have competition. Over the next few days, Primula makes occasional visits to Kenichi and often spends the night at his place. However, However, tonight is different. She's leaving for a supply run tomorrow and won't be able to visit for a while. Before she leaves, she asks Kenichi if he still has that spicy nightgown because she'd like to buy it from him. Curious, Kenichi jokingly asks if she's trying to seduce someone, and to his surprise, Primula admits that the person she's after is him. Kenichi is caught off guard and doesn't know how to respond. He doesn't feel it's appropriate to have that kind of relationship with Primula, especially since he's friends with Mallow, and he doubts Mallow would approve of Primula pursuing an older man like him. However, Primula assures him that she already has her father's blessing, so that won't be an issue. Even so, Kenichi feels overwhelmed with everything going on in his life and tells Primula he isn't ready for a relationship right now, asking if she would be willing to put the conversation on hold. Primula agrees, but makes one request: she wants to share the same bed with Kenichi at least once before she leaves, even if it's just to sleep beside him. The next morning, Kenichi gets an unexpected visit from a knight, who turns out to be the same man he sold a sword to previously. His name is Norseball, and he explains that he was sent to investigate reports of a strange old man living in the woods. However, since he already knows Kenichi, he assures him that he can report back that there's nothing suspicious going on here. Before departing, Norseball shares some intriguing news. There's a mage in the Empire who invented a remarkable condiment called mayonnaise and somehow managed to defeat a dragon with it. Kenichi immediately suspects that this mysterious mage must also be someone from Japan. With the sheer accomplishments of this individual, Kenichi can't help but feel a bit outclassed. But it's not as if he's going to cross paths with this guy anytime soon, so the next month passes without any problems. One afternoon, while Kenichi is sitting at his stall, he suddenly remembers that Primula's supply run caravan should be arriving back soon, so he decides to visit her later that day. However, at that very moment, a loud commotion erupts in the town square, prompting him to get up and check out what's going on. It turns out that a caravan was ambushed by bandits, and everyone on board was taken captive, including Primula. In the streets, Mallow is desperately pleading with adventurers to help rescue his daughter. But since the bandit responsible is none other than the notorious outlaw Shaga, no one is willing to take the risk of facing him. Given the situation, it will take several days before the Knight's Order can organize a proper rescue mission. Meanwhile, Primula is thrown into a cage by Shaga and his gang. She remains unharmed for now, but only because Shaga intends to sell her to some depraved nobles for extra profit, with no real chance of escaping on her own. Her situation looks dire. Mallow understands that it's only a matter of time before Primula meets a tragic fate, so in his desperation, he turns to Kenichi and begs him for help. Kenichi isn't suited for combat in any way, but because he deeply cares about Primula, he ultimately decides to take action. However, he doesn't have enough funds to carry out his plan, so he tells Mallow that he'll need some money to make the necessary preparations. Without a second thought, Mallow hands over a bag of gold coins, willing to give Kenichi every last coin he owns if it means bringing Primula back safely. He informs Kenichi that Shaga's base of operations is located in the ruins, 50 kilometers west of Dahlia, which is quite a distance, meaning Kenichi will need to find a way to travel there. Looking through the vehicles available in his store, he ultimately decides to purchase a truck. But before doing so, he warns everyone that he's about to use summoning magic and advises them to step back. Then, putting on an act, he performs a ridiculous chant to convince everyone that what he's doing is real magic. Once his truck materializes, he climbs on top and calls out, asking if anyone is willing to join him in the fight. Shaga has a massive bounty on his head, so if they succeed in taking him down, there will be a huge reward for everyone involved. However, despite how tempting that sounds, no one steps forward to accept Kenichi's offer, as Shaga is simply too dangerous. Kenichi begins to worry that he might have to handle this on his own, but just then, the bobcat he rescued last month approaches him. Even though he can't understand its language, he can tell that the bobcat is trying to say that it wants to help. Speaking of cats, Miley and the other beast folk also step forward, eager to help Kenichi since they still owe him a favor for everything he's done for them. Seeing that he has allies willing to fight fight alongside him. Kenichi is relieved and immediately starts preparing them for battle. He buys a compound bow for Miley, while her brothers receive an axe and some swords. Just then, he hears another voice offering to help, and when he looks down, he sees Norseball standing there. Kenichi feels much more confident, knowing that an experienced knight will be joining them, though he can't help but wonder why Norseball just happened to be strolling through town in full armor. Norseball explains that he recently had a new sword forged using the steel Kenichi provided him, and he's been looking for an opportunity to put it to the test all day. Taking down some bandits seems like the perfect chance to do just that. One more person steps forward, expressing their desire to join, but to Kenichi's surprise, it turns out to be the magic shop owner. Kenichi immediately tries to dissuade him, insisting that it's too dangerous for someone his age. However, the old man reveals that he was once a mage in his younger days, and despite his age, his fire spells are just as deadly as they were in his prime. Realizing that having a powerful mage on their side would be a huge advantage, Kenichi decides to let him come along. But then, Anama insists that she wants to come along as well. Kenichi tries to convince her to stay behind, pointing out that she wouldn't be able to contribute anything in a fight. However, despite not being a fighter, she argues that she can still offer moral support and cook meals for the group. She also reassures him that the moment a fight breaks out, she'll run away, so he won't have to worry about protecting her. In the end, Kenichi agrees to let Anama join for moral support, but he immediately refuses when Mallow expresses his desire to come too. He firmly tells him to stay put and wait for Primula's safe return. Kenichi once again asks if anyone else is willing to join them, but the rest of the people are too afraid to face Shaga. One by one, they step back, and before long, the crowd disperses. It seems that the 9 of them will have to take on this challenge alone. Before setting out, Kenichi makes a stop at the guild, where he officially registers as an adventurer and formally submits a notice stating that he is pursuing Shaga's bounty. The group then sets out in Kenichi's truck, but as they leave the city, all the people who were too scared to fight begin mocking him because they think Kenichi is just going to run off with the money Mallow gave him. Meanwhile, deep within the ruins, Primula's cell is unlocked so the girl Shaga captured as a slave can bring her some food. However, Primula quickly realizes that the girl is starving, so she offers her the bread instead. Grateful for Primula's kindness, the girl immediately starts eating. As she does, Primula takes the opportunity to ask her a few questions. She finds out that the girl is being held captive here as well, so she asks if she wants to escape with her. The girl would love to get out of here, but she doesn't think it's possible given the current circumstances. However, Primula is sure that it's only a matter of time before help comes for them. After approaching the base, Kenichi and the others decide to take a short break. Once they finish eating, Kenichi gathers everyone together to start their strategy meeting. He lays out a simple assault plan, and the group agrees that it's a solid approach. With the plan set, they all move into position, and Miley is sent ahead to scout the area. Kenichi stays in contact with her using the radios he bought, but to keep things simple, when Miley asks about them, he just tells her they're magical devices that let them communicate over long distances. With Miley now in position as their scout, Kenichi and the others climb into the truck and prepare to set off, leaving Anama behind for her own safety. Since there's no certainty that they'll come out victorious, Kenichi instructs Anama to contact the Adventurers Guild if they don't return within a day. Late into the night, Kenichi checks in with Miley for an update on the bandits, and from her observations, it looks like they're in the middle of a celebration. In fact, most of them are already drunk, making this the perfect opportunity to strike. Just before they move in, one of the beast folk catches Kenichi's attention and hands him a nut. Confused, Kenichi asks what it's for, and the beast man explains that it's a nut meant to help distract him from the reality that he's about to take lives. Apparently, that was good enough for Kenichi, so he takes a bite of the nut, and he is instantly sent on the most intense trip of his life. Kenichi hardly knows what's going on anymore, but he remembers he has a mission to do, so he gets behind the wheel and starts driving like a maniac through the forest. Over at the bandits' camp, the celebrations are still in full swing. Suddenly, as 2 of the bandits notice the truck approaching, Miley takes them out with precise shots to the head. With that done, the next obstacle is the castle gate. To handle it, the old man climbs onto the truck's roof and casts an explosion spell, blasting a hole straight through. At this point, the entire bandit camp is on high alert, but it's already too late. Kenichi and the others have made it inside. Because the bandits had been drinking heavily beforehand, they're all intoxicated and unarmored, making them easy targets. Miley and her brothers swiftly take down the first few who get within range. Meanwhile, Norseball steps out of the truck, eager to christen his new sword with the blood of his enemies. Kenichi is so impressed by Norseball's strength that he gets distracted, and a bandit tries to use the opportunity to stab him in the back. But luckily, the Bobcat steps in to save him just in time. More bandits begin emerging from the ruins, so Kenichi decides to pull out the big guns and summons his bulldozer to squish them. The beast folk continue to take down as many bandits as they can, while Norseball is busy flaunting his superiority over them. Meanwhile, Kenichi is wreaking havoc with his bulldozer, sending the bandits into a panic. In the chaos, he accidentally crashes through one of the walls, revealing a large group of the bandits' prisoners inside. Hoping to find Primula among them, he quickly scans the area, but to his horror, it turns out that Shaga had foreseen their rescue attempt. He's holding Primula hostage at the top of a tower. Primula is relieved that Kenichi actually came to rescue her, but Shaga is mortified because all his men have been wiped out. He assumed that a party would be sent to rescue Primula eventually, but he never could have imagined that they would be this strong. However, even with the current situation, Shaga still thinks he has the upper hand. He orders Kenichi and the others to drop their weapons immediately if they don't want him to stab her on the spot. Everyone hesitates, unwilling to make a move that could put Primula in danger, but Kenichi has no intention of letting Shaga get away. While Shaga is distracted, Kenichi discreetly buys a laser pointer and signals Miley, instructing her to take the shot as soon as he gives the command. Miley understands the signal, so Kenichi directs the laser pointer at Shaga's eye to momentarily blind him. The instant Shaga releases Primula in pain, Miley fires a shot, hitting him right in the shoulder. Wasting no time, Kenichi rushes up the stairs to get Primula to safety, but as Shaga regains his vision, he prepares to launch an attack on the two of them. Luckily, before he can do anything, the slave girl uses some kind of magic to knock him down the stairs, and once he hits the ground, he is perfectly lined up for Miley to give him a headshot. With that, the group emerges victorious, and Primula is finally safe. Their first move is to send Nyanji back to inform Anama of the good news. After that, Kenichi stores his vehicles away and purchases clothes for all the prisoners they manage to rescue. As everyone takes the time to clean themselves up, he notices the little girl and asks Primula to help wash her. While she's at it, he also hands her a pair of scissors so she can trim the girl's hair. Primula glances at the scissors and instantly asks Kenichi if he can sell her more, pointing out that they would be a highly popular item. However, before she can continue, the other women quickly remind her that she's completely naked, causing her to step back in embarrassment. Once everyone is dressed, Kenichi approaches the little girl and introduces himself. She tells him her name is Anemone and reveals that she has an important letter to deliver. The letter exposes the noble who has been funding Shaga's kidnappings, and upon hearing this, Norseball vows to ensure that the noble is brought to justice for his crimes. With that, the incident is finally resolved, and it seems they'll be able to return to Dahlia without any trouble. But before that, exhaustion catches up with everyone, and they all settle in for the night to get some much-needed rest. As the morning arrives, Kenichi drives everyone back to town, where the townspeople eagerly wait, curious to see if he has managed to accomplish his mission. As his truck rolls into town square, Primula quickly hops out and rushes into her father's embrace, overjoyed to see him again. While they share their heartfelt reunion, Mallow's attention is drawn to the dress Primula is wearing, noticing its impressive quality. With pride, she informs him that it was Kenichi who gifted it to her. In that moment, both of them come to the same realization. Speaking of Kenichi, Mallow still hasn't had the chance to properly thank him, so he approaches him and sincerely expresses his gratitude for helping bring his daughter back. While he's at it, Mallow also asks whether Kenichi was able to recover all the stolen goods from Shaga and his crew. In response, Kenichi explains that he stored everything in his item box, but the contents aren't quite what one might expect. What Kenichi actually has in his item box is a collection of heads. Back in the ruins, ruins. Before Kenichi and the others made their way back to town, the beast folk informed him that he would have to take the heads of all the bandits. Shaga and his gang are quite well known, which means there's a hefty bounty on them. However, to claim the reward, Kenichi must provide Shaga's head as proof of his death. But since all those heads will start to stink before long, it would be far more convenient if Kenichi could store them inside his item box. This is without a doubt one of the more unsettling tasks Kenichi has had to handle, but he doesn't have much of a choice, so he begins placing the heads into his item box. While doing so, he also gathers up everything the bandits had stolen, including a sack filled with 100 gold coins and several valuable items. On top of that, he ends up taking all the women who had been held captive by Shaga, though he's unsure about what to do with them. Before returning to town, he asked them if they wanted him to take them back to their villages. Some agreed, wanting to go home, but for others, their situation was different when they were captured. Shaga had burned their homes and slaughtered their families, leaving them with nowhere to return to. Understanding their predicament, Kenichi offered to take all of them back to Dahlia with him, as they would have a better chance at rebuilding their lives there. The women seemed absolutely delighted by the idea. Kenichi then looks over at Anemone and asks if she knows where her hometown is. She tells him that her village is called Europe, but it's pretty far from here, about 800 kilometers away, so getting her back there would be a long and difficult journey. Still, Kenichi is willing to make it happen if that's what she wants. However, Anemone has no desire to return to that village, as her own people had sold her into slavery. In that case, Kenichi asks her if she would like to come with him to Dahlia, and Ain immediately agrees. Kenichi then spends a while driving the women to their various destinations, and once that's done, he heads to the guild with the others to claim the bounty. The guild receptionist panics the moment a severed head is placed in front of her, but that's just the beginning. There are 50 more to go. So, Kenichi starts pulling them out of his storage one by one. With all these heads to inspect, the guild staff have a long and tedious task ahead of them. Meanwhile, Kenichi steps aside to take a break while they handle the work. The wizard approaches Kenichi and warns him that with his unusual summoning magic and exceptionally large item box, things could get really complicated if the nobles ever find out about him. But that's all the more reason for Kenichi to make sure he keeps a low profile. Speaking of nobles, Norseball walks up to Kenichi and tells him he's going to go meet with the local Count Asclepius to inform him of the corrupt nobles that were secretly backing Shaga's crime operation. So, he's going to be leaving now. Later that night, the guild finally completes the process of calculating the reward, which amounts to a total of 861 gold coins. Kenichi, wanting to be fair, suggests dividing it equally among everyone. However, Anama insists that she doesn't deserve a portion, as she didn't contribute during the mission. Since her life was never at risk, she feels it wouldn't be right for her to accept a reward. That said, she does have a small request for Kenichi. She asks if he would allow her to take care of Ain as if she were her own, as the girl reminds her of her daughter. Kenichi has no reason to refuse her request, confident that Anama will look after Ain well, so he entrusts her with the child and heads out into town. Now, while there's no doubt that Anama had the best intentions when offering to care for Ain, it only takes a few minutes before Ain disappeared from her side. Meanwhile, since it's already too late to make his way back into the forest, Kenichi decides to spend the night at Azalea's inn. Before heading inside, he sets out some food for the bobcat, thanking it for keeping him safe during their mission. The moment he steps inside, Azalea immediately lights up with excitement, overjoyed to see him again after such a long time. Azalea had heard rumors about Kenichi defeating a large group of bandits, so she eagerly asks if it's true. However, Kenichi quickly denies it, not wanting to attract unnecessary attention. Setting that aside, she then reminds him of the supposed promise he made to take her as his lover once his business becomes successful. But Kenichi insists he never made such a promise, and, more importantly, asks if there are any rooms available for him to stay in. In response, Azalea tells him that his usual room is still open. Kenichi makes his way upstairs and quickly falls asleep, completely drained from the day's events. However, later that night, he senses someone slipping under the covers with him. He already knows exactly what Azalea is after, but he groggily tells her that he's far too exhausted for that kind of activity right now. Despite this, Azalea refuses to give up. insisting that she doesn't get to see him very often. She climbs on top of him, and just as things are about to escalate, the two suddenly realize that a child and the bobcat are standing there, silently watching them. That completely ruined the mood. In the end, Azalea returned to her room, while Ain ended up spending the night in Kanishi's room. Figuring that Anama must be extremely worried about Ain, Kanishi went over to her shop to check if she was there, but he didn't see any sign of her. With nothing else to do about it for now, he decided to focus on finishing the rest of his duties for the day. Kanishi still has a lot of loot from Shaga's camp, so first, he heads to the weapon store to sell the swords and shields he got. He then sells the rest of the valuables to Mallow's company for 35 gold coins, and takes the furniture to the old man's shop for 22 gold coins. Since the loot is going to be shared evenly, they all end up getting 12 gold coins from it. With his errands finally taken care of, Kanishi decides it's time to head back home. Upon arriving, Ain is stunned by how beautiful the place looks, but to her surprise, she finds Anama already waiting inside. Anama had been worried sick about Ain, but she trusted that Kanishi would eventually find her and bring her here, so she decided to wait. However, Ain unexpectedly declares that she wants to live with Kanishi instead of Anama. Anama doesn't understand why she suddenly wants to stay with Kanishi, so she tries to convince Ain that it would be better to live with her. But Ain has already made up her mind. Anama doesn't want to force her, so she just tells Ain that she's always welcome to visit her whenever she wants. Anama then heads back to town, and Kanishi turns to return home with Ain. On the way back, Kanishi asks Ain why she wants to live with him in the first place. However, there's no deep or philosophical reason behind it. She simply thinks Kanishi makes really delicious food, so she likes him more. After that, the two take a bath together before settling into bed. This new arrangement will definitely take some getting used to. But then again, considering Ain's age, it wouldn't be all that unusual for him to have a daughter. Kanishi eventually falls asleep, but as he rests, several cloaked men begin observing his house. Luckily, the suspicious people don't do anything for now, so life goes on as it normally would for Kanishi. 2 weeks pass, and due to Norseball's contributions in the battle against Shaga, he is awarded the title of Baron, granted some land, and, according to rumors, is now searching for a wife. Meanwhile, some time ago, Kanishi had shown Mallow and Primula a design for a bicycle, but they initially laughed in his face, thinking it looked too ridiculous to ever be profitable. However, it didn't take long for them to come to their senses and realize just how useful bicycles actually are. They apologized to Kanishi for laughing at him earlier and even offered to pay him 5 gold coins for the idea. Now, bicycles are fairly common in the country, and Kanishi is glad that his idea made such an impact. But he's still feeling a bit uneasy because he can't shake the feeling that someone is watching him. He ignores the feeling for now and heads to the guild so he can receive the final payout for the reward. Once he receives his money, Kanishi distributes everyone's share. Even though Anama had insisted she didn't want any, he still gives her a small portion. She doesn't believe she deserves it, but ultimately, she decides to accept his kindness and, in return, hands Ain an apple. Everything appears to be going smoothly, but then, out of nowhere, Kanishi gets that unsettling feeling again someone is watching him. And this time, he's sure he's not imagining things because he sees the person that's spying on him. This could be bad, so he takes Ain's hand and tries to get out of the area. But he soon realizes he is being followed by more cloaked people. He's backed into a corner, so his only option is to run into the alleyway to get away. However, at the end of the alley, he finds himself blocked in by a carriage. The cloaked men finally catch up to him, informing him that their boss wants to meet him alive. They assure him that if he cooperates, there will be no need for violence. With few options at his disposal, Kanishi pretends to go along with their demands. However, just as they're about to load him into the carriage, he quickly pulls some firecrackers from his inventory and hurls them at the cloaked men and inside the carriage. This provides enough of a distraction for him and Ain to crawl under the carriage, and now that he has created some distance, he pulls out a crossbow and points it at the men. He threatens to shoot them if they don't leave him alone, and since the kidnappers don't have any long-range weapons of their own, they are forced to flee. Kanishi lets out a sigh of relief, glad that he managed to escape. Moments later, Mallow arrives in his carriage. Having heard the commotion, he offers Kanishi and Ain a ride, and as they travel together, Kenichi explains everything that just happened. He suspects that this was the work of a noble affiliated with the anti-monarchy faction. Mallow recommends that Kenichi meet with the local lord, Asclepius, to secure some protection, while Kenichi agrees that it might not be a bad idea. He hesitates, worried that Asclepius could end up demanding that he start paying taxes, and he absolutely hates taxes. In the end, he figures it might be a better option to simply leave the city altogether. After returning home, Mallow tells Primula about Kenichi's decision to leave town, and Primula is upset because they haven't even gotten to properly thank Kenichi for everything he did for them. The bicycles were such a popular item that the local lord granted them a family name because of it, and as such, they owe Kenichi a great debt, so they can't allow him to leave until that debt has been fully repaid. Because of this, Primula has made up her mind to leave town with him and spend as much time with Kenichi as she can. She had already attempted to win his affection once before, only to be rejected. However, when she was kidnapped, Kenichi didn't hesitate for even a moment to risk his life to rescue her. So, Primula is convinced that Kenichi must care about her deeply, and if that's the case, then he'll surely wait to see her before leaving town. However, it turns out she may have overestimated his feelings because he's already gone, and not just him, but his entire house as well. Meanwhile, Kenichi is cruising along on his new motorcycle, and he must be pretty confident in his riding skills because he only bought a helmet for Ain, not for himself. As he rides, he happens to spot a familiar carriage and knows who it belongs to, so he pulls up beside Fayu and greets him. It's been quite some time since Kenichi last saw Fayu, so they take a moment to catch up. During their conversation, Fayu learns that Kenichi did, in fact, become a merchant. He also discovers that Kenichi was the one who came up with the bicycle invention, now has a daughter, and is currently on the road. Naturally, this makes him curious about where they're headed next. Kenichi explains that he and his new family are traveling, though he isn't entirely sure where their journey will take them. Fayu wishes them luck, and with that, Kenichi and the others jumps back onto the motorcycle and speed up riding off into the distance. Kenichi and Anemone have been on the road for quite some time now, covering a distance of nearly 100 kilometers from Dahlia. However, they are only about 5 or 6 kilometers away from their next stop, the town of Astrantia. During their journey, Kenichi has been camping alongside Anemone, preparing all kinds of delicious meals, making this experience quite similar to the peaceful life he has always dreamed of. Even so, with Anemone by his side, he feels the need to find a more permanent place to settle down soon. For her well-being, to help him find the next town, Kenichi purchases a drone and sends it up to survey the surroundings. He soon discovers that the river flows into a lake, with Astrantia likely situated on the opposite shore. With that in mind, he takes Anemone and the bobcat and begins traveling downstream. Eventually, they reach a spot that offers a beautiful view of the lake, prompting Kenichi to let Anemone and the bobcat play in the water for a while. Since the area looks so appealing, he decides that this will be the perfect place to build his new home. After cutting away a good portion of the vegetation, Kenichi takes his house out of his item box. As he gets everything in place, he suddenly realizes that he never actually gave the bobcat a name. Taking a moment to think it over, he spends a few minutes considering different options before finally settling on a name Vel. That night, Kenichi begins teaching Anemone how to read and write, and since she's quite smart, she picks it up fairly quickly. However, when it comes to math, she finds it a bit more challenging. While Anemone struggles to solve the math problems, Kenichi takes a moment to check his store window, hoping to find a way to get diesel at a lower cost. Up until now, he's been making his own diesel using kerosene and additives, but he recalls seeing a show that mentioned biodiesel could be made from cooking oil. Not entirely sure how the process works, he decides to purchase a couple of books to learn more about it. As Kenichi is reading, Anemone finishes her homework and asks if she can read along with him. He explains that she won't be able to understand it since the book is written in the language of his homeland, but Anemone insists that she wants to learn that language as well. Seeing how eager she is, Kenichi decides to buy a children's book for her, and without wasting any time, she dives right into studying it. Next on Kenichi's list, he begins setting up camouflage around his house to make it blend in better with the surroundings. While he's in the middle of that, he suddenly hears rustling rustling coming from the bushes. The sound immediately puts him on alert, as it could mean a monster is lurking nearby, ready for anything. He loads his crossbow and prepares to defend himself against whatever might emerge. However, to his surprise, the source of the noise turns out to be Miley. She was devastated when Kenichi disappeared without telling her, so she worked hard to track his scent and followed him all the way here. And now that she's here, she has nowhere else to go, so she says she will be living with Kenichi from now on. Kenichi doesn't really mind, and Anemone seems to get along great with Miley, so it is agreed that Miley will live with them. While having dinner, Kenichi asks Miley if anything interesting has happened since he left Dahlia. She doesn't think there's been much going on, but she does remember hearing that Norspal proposed to Primula, and the two are set to get married soon. Kenichi is happy to hear that Primula was able to move on and get engaged to a good guy like Norspal, though he realizes he won't be able to attend the wedding since he's now so far away. Later that night, Kenichi takes a bath with Anemone as usual, while Miley washes herself nearby. Once everyone is dried off, they head back inside. Anemone excitedly shows Miley the Japanese book Kenichi gave her, and Miley finds it really enjoyable. Even though she can't read the words, the pictures make it easy to understand. Hearing her say that sparks an idea in Kenichi, since books are considered valuable in this world. Selling picture books could turn out to be a highly profitable venture, although the stories from Japan probably won't appeal to the people of this world. Kenichi asks Anemone and Miley if they know any local legends. They are both excited to hear this since they know a ton of old legends, but one in particular stands out to Kenichi, so he asks them to tell him more about the forest elf legend. Kenichi finds the story really enjoyable, so he quickly gets to work creating illustrations for it. Once he finishes the drawings, he purchases an ink press and uses it to produce multiple copies. The first two copies go to Miley and Anemone, and both girls absolutely love their books. However, as they are admiring the illustrations, Kenichi suddenly spots a boat approaching. Sensing that this could spell trouble, he instructs the girls to go back inside for now. As the boat approaches the shore, Kenichi points his crossbow at the men aboard and demands to know why they are here. The man tells Kenichi to calm down because he's not here to cause any trouble. He's from the village of Santanka, and after seeing that someone moved in on the other side of the lake, they decided to come take a closer look to make sure that there weren't any bandits here. This helps Kenichi relax a bit, so he lowers his crossbow and explains that he's a merchant who recently moved into the area. At that moment, Vel walks over to Kenichi, and the beast folk is taken aback, as bobcats are known for never forming bonds with people. Seeing that Kenichi has managed to befriend one convinces him that he must be a trustworthy person. Crouton chooses to take the beast man's word for it, so he introduces himself to Kenichi, and the beast man follows suit. Kenichi decides to show Crouton and Nyanyas around his house to prove that he isn't doing anything dangerous, and everything looks pretty normal, so Crouton apologizes for the intrusion and then prepares to leave. But before he does, he notices the books Kenichi made on the table and asks if Kenichi would let him buy one for his daughter, and Kenichi agrees. Once Crouton and Nyanyas leave, Kenichi and the girls sit down for lunch together. Afterward, Anemone stays inside, spending some time reading, while Kenichi heads into the forest to search through the bushes for medicinal herbs. However, before long, Miley approaches him. Since Anemone is busy at the moment, she hopes to have some alone time with Kenichi. Unable to turn her down, one thing leads to another, and things happen again. A little while later, Kenichi gets to work on his latest project, but all of a sudden, he runs out of the shed because the hazmat suit he was wearing made him incredibly sweaty, so he jumps in the river and takes a break. Once he gets back to work, it's revealed that Kenichi has been focused on synthesizing biodiesel from cooking oil. Although the process is quite dangerous, if he succeeds, he'll be able to produce his own diesel without having to spend a fortune. Now comes the most critical part, testing the fuel. He pumps it into the generator, and luckily, it doesn't explode, meaning Kenichi's experiment was a success. Next on the agenda is visiting the town of Astrantia, so Kenichi heads out with Miley and Anemone. Their first stop upon entering the city is the Adventurers Guild, since Kenichi needs to register. They walk inside and head to the receptionist's desk, but as they greet the receptionist, there are two big things Kenichi can't keep his eyes off. After snapping out of his thoughts, Kenichi informs the receptionist that he wants to register with both the city's Adventurers Guild and Merchant Guild. At the same time, Miley also registers as an adventurer. The receptionist takes their IDs and heads to the back to process their registrations. However, when she returns, she looks a bit flustered, having just checked Kanishi's file. She realizes that he's the one who defeated Shaga. Kanishi quickly tells her to keep her voice down, as he's trying to maintain a low profile. The receptionist catches on immediately and assures him that his registration is complete, allowing him to go about his day as usual. After leaving the guild, they all settle down in the town square to have a meal. However, since spices in this country are still under the control of the Spice Syndicate, all the food tastes rancid. Anemone and Miley clearly aren't enjoying their meals, so Kanishi hands them a bit of his spice blend to add some much-needed flavor. Just then, he spots a couple of thugs with JoJo-style hair lurking around, and they definitely look like they're up to no good. Still, as long as it doesn't concern him, Kanishi decides to mind his own business. At the same time, he notices Crouton walking into an alleyway with a young girl, and something about it seems suspicious, but again, it's not Kanishi's problem. He carries on with his sightseeing and comes across an old magic shop that looks interesting, so he heads inside. He finds an old lady running the shop, and while looking around, he notices a magic device on display, so he asks her what it does. Granny is more than happy to demonstrate its function. She pours some water into one compartment and a lot of wine into the other, and as a result, all the water is separated out of the wine. The first thought that crosses Kanishi's mind upon seeing this is that he can use it to produce his diesel without exposing himself to harmful chemical fumes that could shorten his lifespan. He tells Granny that he wants to buy a magic device, and she's taken aback, as hardly anyone ever actually offers to purchase anything here. But since Kanishi is a paying customer, there's no way she's going to refuse. Meanwhile, it seems like Anemone has also found something that interests her. She excitedly shows Kanishi a book she picked up. Granny explains that it's a grimoire, and the moment Kanishi hears that, he immediately decides to buy it as well. He isn't sure if he'll be able to use it, though, since wielding magic requires a certain level of magic power. After purchasing the book, Kanishi is eager to start reading it with Anemone right away, but Granny stops them, explaining that grimoires must be registered before a customer is allowed to take them. Since the process takes some time, Kanishi will have to return for it in a week. He doesn't mind waiting, so he and the others leave to continue exploring the town. However, as they step outside, they unexpectedly run into Nyanyas. He looks surprised to see them, but is clearly in a hurry and doesn't have time for a conversation. Kanishi gets a bad feeling that he's about to get dragged into something troublesome, so he decides they should all head home. But before they can do so, the group spots Crouton and his daughter being attacked in an alleyway. Kanishi can't ignore it this time, leaving him with no choice but to step in. However, before taking action, he purchases a plague doctor mask to conceal his identity from the thugs. These thugs hold a deep grudge against Crouton and were fully intent on ending both his and his daughter's lives. Just as they are about to carry out their plan, Kanishi suddenly appears behind them, launching fireworks into the air. He boldly claims that the fireworks are just one of his many magic spells. Unfamiliar with such a spectacle, the thugs panic and flee in terror. Once he ensures that the man is safe, Crouton sits down by the fountain and begins recounting the entire story to Kanishi. Back when Crouton used to work as a government official, he worked hard and arrested a bunch of members of the Spice Syndicate, and ever since, they've been targeting him. Crouton's daughter asks if Kanishi and the others are his friends, so Crouton explains that he met Kanishi a few days ago, and he's the one who made the picture book he bought for her. Mary gets excited after hearing that her favorite book was made by Kanishi, so she starts thanking him for it. But Anemone gets a little jealous, so she mentions that she helped make the book as well. So Mary thanks her as well and asks if they can make a book together sometime, and Anemone says she would love to. Kanishi is glad to see that Anemone finally has a friend the same age as her. A few days later, Crouton and his wife brought Mary to visit Kanishi and Anemone. Since this was their first time having guests, Kanishi took the opportunity to prepare a meal for everyone to share. From that moment on, it became a regular occurrence for them to spend time together, with Mary and Anemone happily playing while the others enjoyed each other's company. However, one day, Mary didn't show up like she usually does. Instead, dead, a desperate crouton came begging Kenichi for his help. He tells Kenichi that Mary got sick with one of this nation's diseases, and most children who contract it don't even survive one night, so he needs to do something to help her soon. He's ready to spend every last coin he has if it means saving Mary, but hiring a mage to use healing magic is beyond his reach, leaving Kenichi as his only hope. Kenichi refuses to stand idly by while Anemone's friend is in pain, so he hands Crouton a pack of painkillers, instructing him to give them to Mary to help lower her fever. Hopefully, he also gave some guidance on the proper dosage. Although the painkillers will help reduce Mary's fever, they won't cure her, so Kenichi quickly rushes off to summon the magic granny for assistance. Later that night, everyone gathers at Crouton's house to check on Mary, and as soon as Granny arrives, she instantly recognizes that Mary is suffering from a condition known as Chicory fever. Though difficult to cure with healing magic, the illness is treatable, but it requires the seeds of a rare flower that only grows deep in the forest. Someone must retrieve them before morning, so Kenichi, Crouton, and Nyanya's set out on the mission. However, as they depart, it becomes clear that the Spice Syndicate thugs had been watching the entire situation unfold, and with Kenichi and Crouton now gone, they are undoubtedly planning to make their move. Kenichi and the group quickly make their way to the river where the chicory flower seeds are located. He takes out an inflatable raft and rows into the water to retrieve a seed. It doesn't take much time for him to spot a cluster of the flowers, so he plucks one of the seeds and gives it to Crouton, who is deeply grateful for all his assistance. However, their mission isn't over yet, as they still need to deliver the seed to Mary to cure her. To make matters worse, they face another challenge. Nyanya senses something coming their way, and soon they realize it's a pack of black wolves. By the time they notice, it's already too late to escape. They're completely surrounded. Kenichi has faced the black wolves before, so he purchases 2 swords and gives them to Crouton and Nyanya's. The priority at this moment is ensuring Mary receives the medicine, so he instructs them to sprint back to the house as quickly as possible, while he stays behind to fend off the wolves. To distract the wolves, he starts launching fireworks, drawing their attention and steering them away from Crouton. However, a few wolves manage to separate from the pack and trap Crouton and Nyanya's. Realizing they're in danger, Kenichi hurries back as fast as he can to assist them. But as this is happening, we notice those thugs from earlier concealed behind the trees, apparently controlling the wolves using some kind of whistle. The wolves then turn their aggression toward Nyanya's and Crouton, forcing the two to defend themselves with the swords Kenichi provided. The thugs grow furious seeing Crouton somehow managing to hold his own, but their intense malice allows Vel to detect their presence. Without hesitation, she swiftly takes down all the thugs. Vel then goes after the dogman, striking him and causing him to drop his whistle. The moment the whistle falls, the wolves immediately cease their attack on Crouton. Kenichi witnesses this and understands that the thugs must have been controlling the wolves the entire time. Now that the dogman has lost his whistle, he urges Nyanya's to take Crouton and escape while they still can. The dogman, however, manages to push Vel off and retrieves his whistle, attempting to command the wolves to chase after Crouton, but the wolves appear too frightened to obey. Confusion sets in as no one understands what's happening, until suddenly, a massive bear emerges. The wolves quickly grasp the severity of the danger they're in and scatter, fleeing the forest. The first to fall to the bear's fury is the dogman. After collapsing to the ground, he looks unmistakably dead. The bear then shifts its focus and charges toward Kenichi, but Vel steps in, blocking its path and clawing at the bear's face. Kenichi thanks Vel for her assistance and quickly pulls out more fireworks, hoping to scare the bear away. This time, he uses 10 times the usual amount, confident it will be enough to drive the beast off. However, to his astonishment, the bear gobbles up the fireworks, causing a massive explosion inside its mouth. While the bear is still dazed from the blast, Kenichi seizes the moment and brings out his bulldozer, delivering a powerful blow to the bear's face to finally take it down. With the bear now dead, Kenichi stores its body in his inventory, along with his bulldozer, relieved to have survived the intense fight. However, he still has to figure out what to do with the unconscious dogman. After some time, Kenichi heads back to Crouton's house to check on Mary's condition. Thanks to the medicine he retrieved, she's expected to make a full recovery, leaving Crouton and his wife immensely grateful to Kenichi. While Kenichi isn't usually usually the type to go out of his way to save others. He can't deny that helping out in this situation has left him feeling pretty good about himself. At that moment, Kenichi recalls something important he needs to discuss with Crouton, so he asks to speak with him privately for a moment. The two step outside, and Kenichi explains to Crouton that he managed to strike a deal with the dogman in the woods. He bandaged the dogman's wounds to prevent him from dying, and in return, the dogman promised never to harm Crouton or his family again. The dogman agreed to the terms, though he made it clear he has no control over the actions of the other thugs, as many of them still hold deep grudges against Crouton. As a result, they will undoubtedly keep targeting him, though the situation might change if Crouton were to leave the town altogether. Kenichi suggests to Crouton that leaving the town might be the best course of action, as it would guarantee no one comes after him or his family again. Crouton acknowledges that moving away would be the ideal solution, but he admits he has nowhere to go, and he can't relocate to Dahlia since the Spice Syndicate operates there as well. Kenichi pauses to think for a moment and then proposes a solution to Crouton's problem. He mentions that he knows a knight named Norseball who recently became a baron and is currently looking for people to settle on his lands. If Kenichi writes a letter to Norseball praising Crouton's qualities and skills, he's confident Norseball would allow Crouton and his family to move there. The next day, Kenichi finally returns home and tells the others what happened while he was gone. But Miley is upset because he went on such an amazing adventure without telling her. Kenichi says there was no time to come get Miley. Plus, he needed someone to look after Anemone while he was gone, so there's no way Miley could have gone with him. A few days later, Crouton and his family finally decide to move away for their safety. So, Crouton heads to Norseball's territory first to set things up, while Mary and her mother wait behind because Mary still hasn't fully recovered yet. While Kenichi and Miley are out for a walk, Miley suddenly picks up the scent of blood, and that's when she spots a dogman hiding behind a tree. Kenichi realizes it's the same dogman they encountered a few days earlier and asks him what he's doing there. The dogman calmly explains that he made a promise not to harm Crouton, so he's been wrapping up some loose ends to ensure no other thugs come after him. After all, he adds, dog folks always keep their word. However, after his recent violent spree, the dogman admits he can no longer stay in the city, so he'll be leaving as well. Later that day, Kenichi makes his way into town to sell the bear he killed at the guild. The man responsible for dissection is astonished that Kenichi managed to take down a tusk bear all by himself, but Kenichi humbly replies that he just got lucky. He mentions that he'd like to keep the bear's meat and the magic stone for himself and is only interested in selling the rest to the guild. The man says he understands, but given the bear's massive size, it's going to take him quite a while to finish dissecting it. He asks Kenichi to come back in the evening to collect his earnings. Kenichi doesn't mind waiting a bit, and since it's still only midday, he decides to head home and work on finishing up one of his projects. As Kenichi walks past a shop, he notices a familiar face inside, and it looks like she's searching for someone who's very important to her. Meanwhile, back at Kenichi's house, he finally takes the time to use the artifact he purchased to produce biodiesel. After a lot of careful chemistry work, Kenichi successfully creates what he believes to be pure diesel for his engines. The only way to confirm if it worked is to test it in his generator. When he turns it on, the generator doesn't explode, which means his experiment was a success. Using this method, he managed to produce a liter of diesel for just 300 yen, a significant improvement compared to the 3,000 yen per liter he used to spend. Clearly, that artifact was an excellent investment. Now that that's taken care of, Kenichi decides to leave some food out for Miley and Anemone since he's heading back into town to grab a few things. His first stop is the old woman's shop to check if his grimoire is finally ready. Luckily, she's completed all the registration procedures, so Kenichi is able to take his grimoire. As he examines the book, he's surprised to notice that it has a magic stone embedded in it. The woman then explains that the incantation recorded in the grimoire is tied to that magic stone, meaning the spell won't activate without it. Kenichi isn't entirely sure what she's talking about, but he figures he'll work out the whole magic thing later on. Next on his list, Kenichi makes his way to the Adventurers Guild to collect his items. When he gets there, everything is already packed and ready, so he stores it away in his storage. After that, he heads to the front desk to receive his payment for the parts he sold to the guild. However, Kenichi finds it hard to focus on the money with those 2 melons right in front of him. Eventually, he snaps out of it, takes his payment, and leaves the guild. But as he's walking down the street, he gets this odd sensation, like someone's watching him. It turns out Kenichi's intuition was right because someone was indeed keeping an eye on him, and that someone is Primula. He's completely shocked to see her and immediately asks what she's doing all the way out here, but Primula fires back, questioning how he could have been so cruel as to leave without her. Kenichi tries to explain that the only reason he left Dahlia was because of the nobles trying to capture him, but Primula insists that he should have at least said goodbye to her. Kenichi can sense that this outburst is drawing a lot of attention, so he suggests they continue the conversation somewhere more private. Primula agrees and takes him to the hotel where she's staying. Once there, she starts yelling at Kenichi again, upset that he left without giving her a chance to repay him for everything he's done for her. Kenichi doesn't feel like he did all that much, but Primula quickly reminds him that he saved her life, which means she owes him a massive debt of gratitude. Kenichi starts to feel a bit uneasy, so he shifts the conversation and brings up the rumors he heard about Primula getting married to Norseball. While there were indeed discussions about it, Primula ultimately rejected the engagement, but she brushes that aside, saying it's not the point. Primula declares that she's not going back home unless Kenichi agrees to come with her. However, Kenichi has no plans to leave, so Primula decides she'll just stay here with him instead. Kenichi can see that she's completely serious, so he realizes he doesn't have many options in this situation. Still, he's surprised that she managed to figure out he was living in this city. Primula explains that after Kenichi left, she spent every single day checking the guild registry, hoping his name would appear in another city, and sure enough, one day she spotted his name on an updated registry. Without hesitation, she hopped on a carriage and came straight here. Now that she's found him again, she doesn't beat around the bush and gets straight to the point, asking him to make her a woman tonight. Kenichi is completely caught off guard, but he can see how serious Primula is, so he agrees, and the two of them head up to her room. As soon as they enter, Primula starts removing all of her clothes, unable to wait any longer. And, well, you can guess what happened next. The following morning, Kenichi returns to his house with Primula. At first, Anemone and Miley are thrilled to see him, but their excitement quickly fades when they notice Primula. Primula, on the other hand, gets upset because she believes Kenichi left her behind but decided to bring Miley with him instead. Kenichi explains to her that he didn't intentionally bring Miley along. She simply tracked him down on her own. The only person he deliberately chose to bring with him was Anemone. But is Primula really going to allow herself to feel jealous over a child? Kenichi raises a valid point, which helps Primula settle down for the time being. However, Anemone then insists that Kenichi promise not to bring any other women back. This stirs up Primula's emotions once more, as she starts to believe Kenichi has been bringing women home regularly. Later that evening, Kenichi prepares a bath, but when it's time to get in, all the girls insist they want to join him. Not wanting to deal with the situation, he decides to buy a second barrel, so there are 2 separate baths. Once everyone has finished bathing, Kenichi sets up a blow dryer. After they're all dry, he sits down at the table to test out the grimoire. He reads the incantations for a fireball spell, but as he finishes casting, his fears are confirmed. Nothing happens. This confirms he has no magical power, and he realizes he's wasted a significant amount of money on a book he can't even use. He begins brainstorming ways to sell the grimoire in hopes of recouping some of his money. However, while he was lost in thought, Anemone picked up the book and started reading it. This time, something actually happens. It seems Anemone has a considerable amount of magical power, as she manages to cast the fireball spell perfectly on her very first attempt. Unfortunately, they're inside a log cabin, which isn't the ideal place for such a spell. Kenichi panics and quickly purchases multiple fire extinguishers to tackle the fire. After dealing with the flames, he goes to check on Anemone. She begins to apologize for all the trouble she's caused, but Kenichi isn't concerned about the incident itself. Instead, he's far more astonished that Anemone Anemone manage to use magic. However, out of nowhere, Anemone collapses, causing everyone to grow worried. They take her to bed, and fortunately, by the next morning, her fever starts to subside. Kenichi offers her a can of peaches to help boost her blood sugar. The others also have some peaches, and Primula is taken aback by the amount of sugar in them, as nobles in the country hold a total monopoly over sugar. After a bit of bed rest, Anemone was feeling fine, so a few days later, once Mary had fully recovered from the chicory fever, Kenichi invited her over for a barbecue. He still had plenty of wild bear meat on hand and thought this would be a great way to use it up. Sharing a hunt with close friends is exactly the kind of peaceful, simple life he's been dreaming of. Kenichi takes pride in the fact that his cooking skills are appreciated, so he decides to impress everyone with a new bear curry recipe he's created. When they all taste the soup, they're amazed because bear meat is typically tough and has a strong smell, but this dish transforms it into something incredibly delicious. As the day progresses, Mary and Anemone spend time playing together, while Kenichi assists them in creating their own picture books. However, this is the first time Primula has ever come across such books, so she curiously asks Kenichi about them. He explains that they are simply books that use illustrations to convey a story. After taking a moment to think, Primula quickly identifies a potential audience for the books and is already considering plans to expand sales all the way to the royal capital. She asks Kenichi if she can use the picture books, as she's planning to start a business in Astrantia. Kenichi has no problem giving her a few books, but he's curious about what else she intends to sell. Primula has already considered this and confidently tells him that she can also sell the canned peaches Kenichi has, along with the bear stew he made. Since both are incredibly delicious, she's certain they'll sell out in no time. However, they'll need someone to assist with customer service, so Mary's mother steps up and offers to help. She feels it would be wrong not to contribute after everything Kenichi has done for her and her family. Plus, since Primula is still unfamiliar with Astrantia, having someone who knows the area well would be beneficial. Mary also volunteers to help, as she's now old enough to start working. Seeing that everyone else will be involved in running the new stall, Anemone doesn't want to be left out either, so she eagerly declares that she'll work there too. The following day, Primula is eager to get started, so Kenichi takes her to the city gate and purchases a food cart for her to use. As the day progresses, the food cart gradually gains traction, with customers arriving from all directions. However, the growing attention also draws in a few bandits who sneak a bug into their bowl and then falsely accuse Primula of serving contaminated food. Meanwhile, Kenichi is occupied with land surveying using his drone. From what he can see, the forest atop the hill remains completely untouched, making him confident that he'll come across plenty of medicinal herbs and wild vegetables. However, what he wasn't expecting was to discover a large number of gemstones embedded in the rock. The colors of these gems are unlike anything he's ever seen before, so he isn't sure exactly what they are, but he's certain they must be valuable. It seems he'll be trying his hand at mining soon, but that will have to wait for another day, as he needs to head back to town to pick up Primula and the others. Kenichi rides into town on his motorcycle and spots the group waiting with all their belongings packed up. Primula excitedly announces that they completely sold out on their very first day, which makes Kenichi happy to hear. However, he quickly notices a new beast woman standing with them and asks who she is. Primula then begins explaining what happened earlier that day, how two men tried to blackmail her by planting a bug in the food. But before the situation could escalate, Naimna stepped in and exposed them, revealing that she had witnessed them sneaking the bug into the dish. Since Naimna despises scammers, she decided to take matters into her own hands. The two men panicked and fled, and after that, Primula chose to hire Naimna as her bodyguard for the rest of the day. Kenichi expresses his gratitude to Naimna for being such a great help, but she brushes it off, saying it was nothing. In fact, she considers herself lucky to have met Primula since she got paid a silver coin just for glaring at troublemakers. The group then makes their way back to Kenichi's house together. As they arrive, Miley and Anemone come outside to greet him, but Miley's mood quickly shifts when she notices that Kenichi has brought home another another woman. Sensing her hostility, Kenichi quickly explains that Naimuna is simply a bodyguard that Primula hired, and that she's only here because Primula wanted to treat her to dinner. Miley is fine with it so long as Naimuna isn't planning to become yet another rival for Kenichi's affection. They go inside to enjoy dinner. Naimuna gets her first taste of Kenichi's bear meat stew and is astonished by how delicious it is. The only thing that could make it even better, she thinks, is a glass of wine to go with it. Fortunately, Kenichi happens to have some, so he pours her a glass, and she practically melts with satisfaction after taking a sip. As they continue eating, Kenichi asks if she'd like to take a bath once she's finished. Hearing this, Naimuna's ears perk up in excitement at the thought of a hot bath. Since the baths will be put to use, Anemone offers to heat them up. They step outside, and Anemone begins to cast her fireball spell, instantly heating up the bath barrels by setting it ablaze. She repeats the process for the second barrel, and everyone is amazed at how skilled she has become with her magic. Afterward, they all take their baths and dry off using Kenichi's blow dryer. Once they're finished, they change into their bedtime clothes. Naimuna has been enjoying her time here so much that she's thinking about staying permanently. However, Miley is firmly opposed to the idea, arguing that there are already too many women living here as it is. They soon spot Kenichi in the midst of a lesson with Anemone and decide to ask him what he's doing. Kenichi explains that he is teaching Anemone some fundamental writing and math skills to help expand her knowledge. In a world like this, making a living without an education can be quite challenging, so he wants her to learn as much as she can while she has the opportunity. He then asks if she would be open to joining Primula and the others the next time they take the food cart into town so she can gain some insight into the business. However, Anemone responds that she would prefer to continue learning magic so she can stay by Kenichi's side. The following day, Primula and the others return to town to continue running the cart business, and it remains just as popular as it was the day before. However, with Naimuna acting as their bodyguard, they don't have to worry about any troublemakers stirring up problems. Meanwhile, Kenichi has just finished constructing a scaffolding with Miley and Anemone's assistance, preparing to begin excavating the gemstones as soon as possible. But since it's already getting quite late, he decides to leave it for tomorrow. As he packs up his things, Primula walks over and asks how he always manages to have such useful items stored in his item box. Kenichi, however, simply tells her it's a secret. No matter how much she presses him, there are just some things he can't reveal. He realizes that might make him seem suspicious, but she'll just have to deal with it. After that, he kisses her, only for Naimuna to complain, telling Kenichi to cut out the romance since it's just reminding her of how single she is. The following day, the group heads back to the plain. After Kenichi clears away some of the overgrown vegetation, they all start searching the area for various interesting plants. While the others are busy combing through the bushes, Kenichi begins carving into the mountainside to extract some of the gemstones. Once he manages to pry one loose, he tosses it into his item box to have it appraised. To his delight, the gem is valued at 200,000 yen each, with so many of them embedded in the mountainside. Kenichi realizes he's practically struck gold, or rather, gems. After a productive day of profitable gem mining, the group makes their way home, and Kenichi gets started on preparing dinner. He has something special planned, so he has the girls help grind some of the bear meat before teaching them how to wrap the gyoza. However, Miley and Naimuna have to sit this step out due to all their fur. After all the pieces have been carefully folded, Kenichi places them in a pan to cook, and before long, the gyoza is ready to be served. Everyone is captivated by its delicious flavor and perfect texture, especially when paired with the yellow sauce Kenichi prepared. When they ask about it, he explains that the sauce is mayonnaise. Naimuna immediately recognizes the name, as mayonnaise has become quite popular in the Empire lately. It turns out that a mage had created it using magic, so Primula asks Kenichi if he also used magic to make his mayonnaise. Kenichi, however, explains that he simply made it with vinegar, eggs, and oil. Primula is stunned to learn that something as incredible as mayonnaise can be made without any magic involved, and she eagerly asks Kenichi to teach her how to make it. But he's not in the mood to do that at the moment, so he responds, "In another moment." Hearing this, Primula asks if he would be willing to let her sell his gyoza recipe at her food stall the next day. Kenichi has no objections, but he warns her that making gyoza is quite labor-intensive, so he's not sure she'll be able to keep up with the demand. However, Primula reassures him that won't be an issue since she can always hire more workers. Kenichi is impressed by her proactive attitude, so he decides to teach her one more of his recipes. He asks everyone to follow him outside, saying he has something special to show them. Without hesitation, he pours some liquor over the meat, creating a massive fireball. Once the steak is perfectly grilled, he offers Naimna the first bite. She goes completely silent after tasting it, prompting Kenichi to ask if something is wrong with the steak. However, it's quite the opposite. She's speechless because the steak is absolutely perfect. That said, she does notice it has a peculiar smell. Kenichi explains that the scent likely comes from the liquor he used to marinate the steak. As soon as he mentions liquor, Naimna immediately jumps on him, begging for a drink. After some persuasion, Kenichi reluctantly agrees to let her have a little, but he warns her that the drink is quite strong and advises her to take it slow. Naimna, however, completely disregards his warning and gulps down the entire glass in one go. She instantly gets drunk and wraps her arms around Kenichi, thanking him for the liquor. However, Miley sees exactly where this is headed and quickly grabs Naimna by the hair to pull her off him. Naimna tries to reassure Miley that she's not trying to steal Kenichi away from her, she just wants him to let her stay in the shed so she can continue enjoying delicious meals with him and the others. Miley still isn't convinced, but Kenichi doesn't see any issue with letting Naimna stay, especially since she serves as Primula's bodyguard. Primula agrees, saying she has no problem with Naimna living there. Considering all she really wants is food, there's no way she'd try to seduce Kenichi when no one is around. A little later, once they're alone, Kenichi takes Naimna to see the room he prepared for her. She then asks how much she'll need to pay for rent. Kenichi assures her that she doesn't need to pay rent, as long as she continues to help Primula out. With that, he tries to leave, but Naimna grabs him and suggests she could repay him in another way. However, Miley, sensing the flirtatious tone from a mile away, bursts through the door and steps into the room to join the conversation. Several weeks have passed, and Kenichi continues his mining operation, having earned around 15 million yen from the rhodonite stones so far. However, that amount is nothing in comparison to Primula's food stall, which has steadily grown into a full-fledged company called Corolla, employing a large number of workers. The business now brings in over 200,000 yen per day, meaning its annual revenue exceeds 70 million yen. Kenichi still finds it hard to believe that Primula managed to build all of this from scratch in just a few weeks, though a significant part of her success comes from the incredible products he introduced. Kenichi is simply grateful that he's been able to spend the past few weeks focusing on his own projects, as it has been a truly relaxing experience for him. He wishes he could continue enjoying this peaceful lifestyle, but it seems that won't last much longer. He's about to receive rather problematic visitors. Word of his accomplishments has reached the royal castle, and it appears two women are especially eager to meet him. On a large private property, Primula is sitting next to Kanon, the wife of Viscount Eupatorium. Both greet each other, and Kanon comments that she has heard a lot about Primula, as she is the daughter of the owner of Dahlia Mallow Trading Company, which invented Dracine and owns Corolla Restaurant. Meanwhile, Kenichi narrates that Primula is visiting the house of the Lord of Astrantia. Kenichi is at Granny's shop. He buys a book on explosion magic, while Anemone is reading a book on household magic, so the old woman gives the second book to them for free. Later at night, the group sits while Primula explains that Kanon wants a brooch because when she visited Dahlia, another noblewoman boasted about a special brooch that only Mellow Company produces, which made Kanon feel inferior. Kenichi comments on how the nobles always compete for such things and gives Primula a stone, which has a woman elegantly carved onto it. When Primula shockingly claims that the woman looks like Kanon, Kenichi makes up a story telling her to tell the Viscountess that the brooch was specifically customized for her and get a large sum of money out of her. In the group, a tigress is also sitting, so Miley explains that one random day, a tigress named Naimna started calling herself the bodyguard of Primula and started living with them. Miley further adds that Naimna pretends that she only cares for food, but Miley believes that Naimna is interested in Kenichi. Miley decides that she will fight Naimna for a decade if she has to, but she won't let her have Kenichi. The next morning, Miley tells Kenichi that there is a dungeon nearby, but she didn't mention this at dinner time because then Naimna would have asked to tag along. Kenichi tells Miley to try and become friends with Naimna, but Miley refuses to do so. Their conversation conversation is interrupted by an excited Anemone, who says that she wants to explore the dungeon as well, and Miley tries to change Anemone's mind by telling her that there will be monsters in the dungeon, but Kenichi agrees to take Anemone with them upon her insistence. The three head into the dungeon, and they are fascinated by how beautiful it is. As they venture deep into the dungeon, they take pictures at various spots. Eventually, Kenichi discovers expensive crystals and starts to drill them while thinking about the fortune he can make from them. However, the drilling sound is too loud for Anemone and Miley, as they've never seen a machine like that being used, and Kenichi tells Miley to take Anemone to the other side of the cave, so she doesn't hear the loud drilling noise. Suddenly, Miley hears footsteps and warns Kenichi that someone is coming. A large spider emerges from within the dungeon, awakened by the sound of drilling, and Kenichi quickly summons weapons for the possible fight. Kenichi is at the same time amazed by the huge size of the spider, but Miley tells him to attack the spider. However, the spider doesn't get slightly damaged by the arrow thrown at him, as its skin is hard as rock. Miley throws another arrow that lands on the eye of the spider, and it causes it to scream in pain, realizing eyes as the spider's weak point. Kenichi orders Anemone to use her fireball magic to attack the spider's eyes, but Anemone is so stressed by the spider's appearance that she is unable to do anything. The spider then launches its thread on them, and Miley quickly has to drag Anemone away from being trapped in the spider web. Kenichi throws a few bombs onto the spider to distract it, and summons his motorbike before ordering everyone to run out of the dungeon. Once they get out, Kenichi comments on how the spider didn't pursue them outside, so Miley explains that cave spiders only come out to hunt at night. Anemone is still shaken, so Kenichi hugs her while telling her that she isn't ready for adventures yet. Anemone apologizes, but Kenichi comforts her for trying her best. Later at night, while showering, Naimna is angry that she wasn't included in the adventure, but Kenichi tells them not to fight, as they will have to go back into the cave to retrieve his drilling machine. He expresses a desire to get the crystals as well, and Naimna says that she will go with them this time. Kenichi says that someone will have to stay back to protect Primula, but Primula says that she wants to take a few days off, so she can be left alone. However, taking days off is so uncharacteristic of Primula that Kenichi questions if she is okay, and Primula reassures him that she is fine. Naimna announces that tomorrow morning they will head into the cave and is excited to fight the spider. The entire group sits in front of the heater, and Kenichi tells Anemone that the grimoire has been registered, so he picked it up. Anemone gets excited and starts to read the book, but Kenichi tells her to read the spells once she is feeling better. Naimna says that she will train Anemone for the adventures, and they both head to the mountain. The next morning, they finally reach the dungeon, and Anemone expresses that she is ready for the battle. They head inside and finally reach the place where Kenichi drilled the crystals. Realizing that the spider showed up once they started drilling, Kenichi starts the machine, which causes all the others to cover their ears because of how loud its sound is. The spider shows up and Kenichi summons the weapons. They use bug killer on the mouth of the spider before Anemone uses her fireball spell, which hits the spider directly. The group starts celebrating as the spider retrieves back into its den as it is badly burnt. They all praise Anemone for her skill, and Kenichi thinks of how hard it must have been for Anemone. Naimna says that they should go after the spider, and Kenichi agrees, as the thought of such a scary spider roaming around the woods at night gives them all a shiver. As they all head into the cave, they find an opening of a huge cavern, and Kenichi summons a big flashlight that lights up the entire cave. There they see the spider in a corner and quickly spray bugs repellent to poison the spider, and Kenichi orders Anemone to throw the final blow. However, before she can, another spider emerges, which Naimna identifies as a female spider, because female spiders are much larger. The group gets scared by the size of this new spider, but they soon realize that this spider can't pass from the openings. Miley says that the male must go out to hunt for food and bring it in for the female spider, as she is too large. Kenichi says that they should run, as the female would die on her own when the male spider won't be able to bring food for her, but the female spider is faster than them and blocks the opening, so they can't escape. In that moment, Vel rushes toward the spider and scratches its eye, which gives the girls enough time to use the bug killer. After that, Anemone uses her fireball magic, but the spider manages to survive. Kenichi wonders why the spider isn't attacking them, and Naima comments that maybe the spider wants them to rot by blocking their way. Kenichi captures the male spider in his item box. While the girls continue to spray poison on the female spider, Kenichi becomes angry, as there is no other exit and the female spider won't die no matter what, so he summons a huge excavator. The girls are shocked that he can summon such a big machine, and Anemone goes with Kenichi to use it to move the spider. However, the spider manages to get a hold of the machine, but Kenichi uses a shovel attack to push it away. The spider gets pushed away, but the spider still manages to stand up again, so Kenichi uses another attack to hit the top of the spider with the crane lift. However, the engine of the machine stops working, and the spider starts crawling up the machine. Kenichi desperately tries to start the engine, but once he looks to the other side, he finds Anemone using another type of magic spell, and she uses the spell Explosion, which makes the spider fly into the wall. The spider becomes really weak, and the machine finally starts again. So Kenichi lands the final blow, which finally kills the spider. Later, Kenichi stores the machine and the female spider as well, before going to mine the crystals in the cave. He reflects on how he managed to waste a lot of money on the machine he bought. However, suddenly he comes across a raw crystal that is very expensive and compensates for the money he wasted. Once they get out of the cave, Kenichi asks Anemone when she learned the explosion magic, and she reveals that it was her first time trying that magic. Back at home, Kenichi summons the female spider to show it to Primula, who screams loudly in shock. Kenichi then puts the spider's egg on the table and tells the girls that he is going to eat it. The girls are disgusted by the idea, and Kenichi thinks of how he doesn't want to eat it, but wants to see how it tastes. He talks about how the best form of egg is steamed custard egg, and prepares the spider's egg that way. He tells them that he won't force anyone to eat it, but it looks so good that everyone enjoys it happily. They find it so delicious that they wonder if there is meat or cheese inside the egg. During this conversation, Kenichi mentions that it is easy to make cheese, and Primula excitedly says that she wants to learn how to make it. He explains that first the milk is curdled by adding apple cider vinegar to it, and all the liquid is squeezed out using a soft cloth. The material that is left behind is called cottage cheese. Everyone enjoys the cheese, and Primula says that she wants him to teach Kanon how to make cheese. Kenichi says that he dislikes mixing with nobles, and Primula gets a flashback of Thogalum, a corrupt merchant, destroying the reputation of the Corolla restaurants of her family. Primula had decided to not tell Kenichi about the issue, but now has no choice but to tell Kenichi, and explains that she wants to deal with the dishonest merchant by having the nobility on her side. Kenichi says that she doesn't need any help from nobles, as he and the girls will easily destroy the merchant. However, Primula says that she is aware she will have to use the help of their power soon, but for now, she wants to deal with things without fighting. Kenichi decides to teach her how to make cheese, so she can teach Kanon. A few days later, Thogalum gets a letter from the Viscount saying that anyone who harasses the Corolla restaurants will be punished heavily. The Corolla restaurant opens again, and a few days later, Kanon visits them and tells Kenichi she knows that he is the one who helped in Dahlia's fight by summoning iron monsters. However, Kenichi pretends not to know what she is saying, but she tells him that she has done her research before coming here, and surprisingly bows down. Kenichi doesn't feel good about the nobility bowing to him, and fears that she might make an outrageous request. As she begins to ask for his help, a sense of dread washes over him. He has a bad feeling about this. Kanon was assigned the task of constructing a canal through the kingdom, but she has fallen behind schedule. If the project isn't finished soon, she risks losing her funding, and there's even a chance her land could be taken away. The final section of the canal that still needs to be built spans 10 miles, and she has just 1 month to complete it. Desperate, she pleads with Kenichi for assistance, offering him any reward he desires, even herself. However, Kenichi declines, making it clear that he's not interested in that. Kanon feels disappointed after being rejected, but she still has one last thing to offer. She then tells Kenichi that she can reward him with a special grimoire high protection. Kenichi isn't exactly sure what high protection is, but Naimina has heard of it before. She explains that high protection is an incredibly powerful spell capable of blocking any attack, even something as devastating as a dragon's breath. That immediately catches Kenichi's attention, as it could be useful in protecting Anemone. He decides to help Kanon, but before any construction then work can start, he needs to secure funding. Kenichi requests Kanon to provide him with any unused furniture she has, so he can evaluate it and earn money through his system. Once he finishes all of that, Kenichi ends up making around 120 million yen, which should be more than sufficient to cover the expenses of using his heavy machinery. Now, he's all set to start. Everyone hops into Kenishi's car, and he drives them to the construction site. During the ride, Kanon asks Kenichi if he's truly not interested in her body as a reward. Kenichi firmly responds, "No, I'm good." This, however, upsets Kanon because she's aware that he has no issue being intimate with beast women, so why is he refusing her? They finally reach the construction site, and Kenichi happens to bump into Miley's brothers Nyamero, and Nyanji. It's great to see them again, but Kenichi wonders why they're out here working in construction. After all, they got a huge sum of money from the payout for killing Shaga, which should have kept them comfortable for a long time, but things unfolded in a way that led them to spend it all. Eventually, they found themselves broke once more. Out of nowhere, Nyamna shows up to see what's happening, and the moment Miley's brothers lay eyes on her, they practically fall head over heels. But setting that aside, Kanon proceeds to introduce Kenichi to the supervisor she hired to check on the construction. The supervisor remarks that she didn't have to come all the way out here in person, but Kanon insists it's necessary because she brought someone to assist. She explains that Kenichi will significantly accelerate the process since he's a mage, but Kenichi quickly corrects her, stating that he's just a merchant. Regardless, the supervisor has no reason to turn down extra help, so he chooses to carry on with his work and asks Kanon to review the bill for the equipment she'll need. As Kanon goes over it, Primula glances at it as well and is immediately appalled by the outrageous prices. She then asks Kanon to let her take care of reviewing the bill, and after carefully reading through the entire thing, she becomes certain that this merchant is attempting to scam her. The man argues that he needs to make a profit from the deal and points out that there aren't any other merchants Kanon can order 200 axes from. However, he's mistaken about that last part because Primula simply turns to Kenichi and asks if he can get 200 axes. Kenichi purchases the axes from his store and shows one to Kanon, asking if it will work. She confirms that it's perfect but wonders how much he plans to charge for them. Primula mentions that she only needs to pay 1 silver coin per axe. It's an incredibly low price, so Kanon asks Kenichi if he's truly okay with it. He responds by saying she can consider it a friend discount. Kanon is thrilled to hear this and decides she'll buy from Kenichi instead. The shady merchant becomes furious and warns her that he's representing the Thogalum Trading Company, so going against them could have serious consequences for her. Kenichi remembers that Thogalum was the one responsible for all the trouble with Primula's stall, and it turns out he's so influential that even the Lord seeks his assistance from time to time. This means that making an enemy out of him could lead to serious problems. However, the priority right now is completing the canal, so without wasting any more time, everyone gets straight to work. Since his backhoe will be in constant use, Kenichi is going to need a large supply of fuel. He pours out 3 vats of it, and after a few minutes, they finally get started. Kenichi's machine proves to be an enormous advantage, as it can accomplish in mere minutes what would normally take them hours to complete. After a full day of work, Kenichi cooks a meal for his friends and offers some to Kanon as well. She's taken aback by how he can prepare such good food even while being in the middle of the forest, and she finds it incredibly delicious too. Kenichi notices the beast folks watching the food from a distance, so he calls them over and invites them to join in and eat with him. But they aren't the only ones feeling hungry. Nearly all the workers are starving since the tavern they usually visit is in the city, making the trip far too costly for them. Seeing their situation, Primula feels bad and comes up with an idea. She asks Kenichi for permission to use his recipe to cook for all the workers. Of course, she still plans to charge them, but at a fair price that everyone can afford. Overjoyed to finally have a meal, the workers eagerly dig in, turning the worksite into what feels like a lively celebration, much to Kanon's delight. Later that night, Kenichi sets up a bath and lets Kanon know she can use it to freshen up. She's astonished that he managed to create a bath in the middle of the woods. Just as Kenichi is about to leave, she suddenly grabs his arm and demands that he bathe with her. Kenichi does his best to resist because, technically, he's married to Primula. He also has to look after Anemone, so he can't just give in to temptation whenever he wants. Kanon, however, finds it admirable how much Kenichi values values his family, especially since, in her case, her own family barely even acknowledged her existence. All her parents ever seemed to care about was who Kanon would eventually marry. Kenichi remarks that it sounds sad, but since it has nothing to do with him, he decides to leave the bathroom before Kanon has another chance to try and seduce him. The following morning, Kenichi wakes up early, and the first thing he notices is Kanon diligently distributing food to all the workers. For a brief moment, he considers that maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea to bath with her at least once. However, as soon as that thought crosses his mind, all the girls close in on him, instantly sensing what he's thinking. Kenichi quickly clarifies that he wouldn't actually sleep with Kanon, as she's a married woman, and he's wise enough to steer clear of that kind of drama. Kanon is well aware that Kenichi doesn't want to fall for her, but with a whole month ahead of them, she's confident that sooner or later, she'll make him give in. Moments later, a woman arrives at the worksite to complain, upset that none of the workers have been visiting the tavern she runs to eat. Primula explains that this is because she started selling food to them at a much more affordable price, meaning the workers no longer need to go to their tavern. She makes it clear that they didn't lose their customers because she stole them, but rather because they were overcharging. If they have any hopes of recovering their business, they need to start being more honest with their pricing. After that, work carries on as usual, and once the trees have been cut down, Kenichi drives by in his backhoe to collect all the wood and debris for storage. They are making steady progress on the canal, and by midday, Kanon's servants finally arrive, significantly increasing the number of people on site. With more workers present, water is starting to become a bit of a concern. While he could purchase it from his store, that would be far too costly. So instead, he opts to strike a deal with the beast folks. They inform him about a nearby spring, but reaching it is nearly impossible unless you have the agility of a cat. So, Kenichi proposes a deal. He'll give them alcohol in exchange for fetching water. Since the beast folks have a strong love for alcohol, they eagerly agree, and before long, Kenichi's water supply problem is completely taken care of. While the beast folks are busy enjoying their drinks, Kenichi announces that he's heading to bed. However, before he can leave, a very drunk Kanon wraps her arm around him and starts dragging him off to the bedroom. After a short while, Kanon drifts off to sleep, so Kenichi quietly leaves the guest room and tries to make his way back into the main house. However, Anemone blocks his path, fully aware of what he just did and refusing to let him in. In the end, the canal is successfully completed within the 1-month deadline and is officially inaugurated during a grand ceremony attended by the royal family. Kenichi had every intention of skipping the event, but Kanon ultimately pressured him into showing up anyway. During the ceremony, Kanon unexpectedly calls on Kenichi to showcase the unique magic that enabled this project to happen. Kenichi has no option but to comply, so he decides to embrace the moment and summons his backhoe to give a small demonstration for everyone present. The crowd is left in awe as Kenichi skillfully balances a log on the edge of the backhoe, and it's truly impressive. Once the ceremony concludes, Viscount Thurberg approaches Kanon, completely stunned that the mage who defeated Shaga is actually in Astrantia. He had been convinced that Kanon would lose her land and be forced to flee the country, but instead, she laughs right in his face, telling him that his joke is almost as amusing as his pathetic existence. Kenichi watches the exchange and assumes it's just a typical rivalry between nobles, but Primula picks up on something more concerning. Inside Thurberg's carriage, there's an old man, someone she instantly recognizes. He's the same man who was stripped of his status in Dahlia after it was revealed that he had been the one who hired Shaga to kidnap her. The following day, Kenichi has a meeting with Graham, Kanon's husband, who wants to personally express his gratitude for all the help Kenichi provided in finishing the project. Up until now, he hadn't put much effort into managing his territory, but after almost losing it due to the deadline, he's determined to change his ways. Additionally, there's something else he needs to discuss with Kenichi. He recently came across one of the picture books Kenichi sold some time ago and is eager to learn how Kenichi created them. Kenichi goes on to demonstrate the entire printing process to Graham, who listens intently, absorbing every detail with excitement. Once Kenichi finishes finishes explaining how the pictures are made, they return to their conversation, where Graham expresses his desire to hire Primula to oversee Ostrantia's finances. While Primula appreciates the opportunity, she realizes it would be too much for her to manage alone, so she asks Graham if she can seek her father's assistance. Graham is familiar with Mallow from the Mallow Trading Company, knowing he's a significant figure over in Dahlia, so he'd be more than pleased to have such a skilled merchant collaborating with him. However, he's uncertain if it's a wise move, as forming ties with one of Dahlia's most influential merchants might push Thogalum to take action. Kenichi has been hearing a lot about Thogalum lately, so he questions why Graham doesn't simply expel Thogalum from Astrantia, given that he clearly has no fondness for him. Graham feels a bit embarrassed to confess this, but given Astrantia's current financial situation, they can't afford to maintain a night order, so if it ever came to a fight against Thogalum and his forces, it's almost certain they'd be defeated. However, Kanon reassures her husband that they actually have a solid chance of winning because they have Kenichi and his magical machine. She's confident Kenichi would be willing to fight for them after all. She's like a friend for him now. Kenichi isn't too thrilled about constantly getting dragged into troublesome situations, but given how serious things are, he agrees to help fight Thogalum if it ever comes to that. Later that night, Kenichi and the others return to their usual spot, and he restores their house to its original place. They also received the high protection grimoire that Kanon had promised, meaning Anemone will soon be able to start learning the spell. But for now, everyone unwinds by taking a bath under the stars. In the meantime, over in the royal palace, Princess Lilith decides to visit her mother while she's at work after hearing that something had happened. The queen informs her that Viscount surprisingly managed to finish building a canal before the deadline. It's kind of amusing, considering that up until now, she'd been constantly receiving letters from Thunberja urging her to strip Viscount Astrantia of both his land and his title for supposed incompetence. Clearly, Thunberja just wanted to seize Astrantia for himself, but if the Viscount had actually failed in his duties, the queen would have been forced to follow through. Fortunately, a highly skilled man showed up and helped him complete the construction in record time. The man they're referring to is none other than our guy Kenichi, who already has an impressive list of accomplishments to his name, so the princess considers that it might be appropriate to grant him the title of Sacred Knight eventually. Meanwhile, Kenichi is still relaxing in the bath with everyone when Nyamna brings up how incredible it is that Anemone can wield such extraordinary magic. Kenichi speculates that Anemone likely inherited her magical abilities from her mother, so he decides to ask Anemone if she knows anything about her mom. Anemone responds that her mother was the one who gave her her name, but beyond that, she doesn't have much information to share. The following day, Kenichi brings Anemone to the magic shop, so she can have her new high protection grimoire officially registered. As soon as that's taken care of, Anemone heads straight to a corner and begins reading her new grimoire right away. While she's absorbed in that, Kenichi takes the opportunity to ask Granny if she knows anything about a woman who died on the street around 10 years ago. He's hoping to uncover some clues about who Anemone's mother might have been, since she was likely a powerful mage of some kind. Granny isn't certain whether this has any direct connection to Anemone, but she does remember hearing about a renowned mage called the Silver Armeria who disappeared about 10 years ago, and as it happens, the high protection grimoire that Anemone just received once belonged to Armeria, so Kenichi is beginning to suspect there could be some kind of link between the two. A short later, as they make their way home, Anemone suddenly feels compelled to try out the grimoire, so she kneels down and begins casting the high protection spell. She's doing pretty well for her very first attempt, but just as the protective barrier is starting to form, it completely falls apart. Right after that, Anemone curls up on the ground in pain, and Kenichi assumes it must be because the spell backfired. However, Miley tells Kenichi that Anemone smells like a woman now, meaning she's actually just experiencing her first period. A few hours after the painkillers have taken effect, Anemone is happy that her tummy pain has disappeared. The following day, Kenichi spots a carriage making its way toward his house, and to his surprise, the one on the carriage is Primula's father, Mallow. In any case, He's here not only to see Primula, but also to talk about the steps they plan to take to eliminate Thogalum. But before they get to that, Kenichi has something important he wants to discuss with Mallow. He's been referring to Primula as his wife for some time now, but he never officially asked for her hand in marriage, so now he wants to make it official. Primula has been living with Kenichi for several months, yet she's still deeply moved by the gesture, and Mallow couldn't possibly hoped for a better son-in-law. That night, a grand feast is held to celebrate the official marriage of Kenichi and Primula. As for the plans to deal with Thogalum, they've decided to form a company with the goal of driving him out of the market entirely. The following day, yet another carriage arrives at Kenichi's place. This time, it's Norseball, who has come in search of Primula, but he's heartbroken to find out that she's already married to Kenichi. Essentially, after Norseball proposed to her some time ago, Primula left him and vanished from the country. He came hoping she might have changed her mind about the marriage, but out of respect for Kenichi, he decides not to pursue it any further. Meanwhile, over in town, Thogalum eventually catches wind that Mallow is setting up shop in Astrantia, and he realizes this spells trouble for his business. Later that same day, Kenichi and the whole group arrive at the market alongside Viscount Kenon. Kenon is currently trying to persuade her husband to construct a road leading to Kenichi's house so she can visit more often, but Kenichi tells her it would be a waste of funds for the time being. He asks her to stay in the carriage with Mallow and Primula while he and the others take care of the Thogalum crew. Kenichi then makes his way over to one of Thogalum's shops, where an attendant quickly approaches to offer assistance. Without wasting time, Kenichi summons the giant spider corpse right in the center of the store. The noise and chaos soon catch Thogalum's attention, prompting him to come out with several armed men to handle the situation. As soon as Kenichi spots him, he introduces himself as a mage and declares that he's there to settle the score for all the trouble Thogalum caused Primula. But Thogalum doesn't see Kenichi as a threat, so he commands his men to attack. However, they're reluctant to go up against Kenichi, and for good reason. Considering the guy just casually summoned a giant spider corpse, Thogalum eventually manages to persuade his men that Kenichi probably just stumbled upon the spider's body in the forest and is using it to bluff his way out of a fight. But Kenichi didn't show up alone. He rolled in with the entire squad by his side, and Norseball is more than ready to stab his sword straight up in the enemy's ass. Thogalum quickly realizes that things are going to be a bit more challenging than he had originally expected, though he remains confident as his men still vastly outnumber Kenichi's allies. But suddenly, Vel enters the fray, and because bobcats are regarded as the divine messengers of the cat people's god, none of the cat people are willing to fight anymore. They immediately lay down their weapons and walk away. With his numbers advantage now gone, Thogalum withdraws into his hideout to escape. Kenichi and the others follow him inside, but it turns out that this was actually part of Thogalum's strategy, as he had even more troops waiting within, and these ones are dog people, so they have no issue throwing hands with Holy Cat. The dog people's leader leaps down to strike at Kenichi, but Norseball steps in just in time to protect him, sparking a full-on battle. Naima and Miley charge in with their weapons, and since they harbor a deep hatred for the dogs, they're highly driven to go for the kill. Meanwhile, Norseball is still locked in combat with the thug's leader, but he's caught off guard when a dagger is hurled at him. Fortunately, Vel comes to his rescue, allowing him to regain his footing and charge back into the fight, slicing the dog man in half. Kenichi then pulls out his backhoe and starts wreaking havoc throughout Thogalum's complex, causing as much destruction as possible and likely taking out a few people in the process as well. Thogalum sees that he's on the losing side, so he attempts to escape his hideout, but Kenichi chases after him and calls in an even larger machine to wipe out the entire building once and for all. However, Mallow steps in and tells him to hold off because he's planning to move in once the Mallow company sets up in the town. Kenichi agrees to stand down, but then Thogalum starts shouting that Kenichi won't get away with any of this. However, Kenichi counters by explaining that they've already succeeded in their plan because, while Kenishi might have initiated the fight, it was Thogalem's men who were the first to unsheathe their swords. Coincidentally, Kenishi was tasked with escorting the Viscount today, which means any attack on him could be interpreted as an attempt on the Viscount's life. Of course, this is entirely fabricated, but Kenishi has the Viscount's support, and all it would take is a single word from him to have Thogalem imprisoned for attempted murder. Now, Thogalem has no choice but to comply with the Viscount's demands, so he instructs him to leave Astrantia at once and never come back. As Thogalem gathers the few belongings he's permitted to take, he steps into the carriage with his family, and he's honorable enough to acknowledge his defeat. However, he believes he only lost because they had Kenishi on their side. He also realizes that all of Mallow's recent achievements selling those rare brooches in Dahlia must have been thanks to Kenishi as well. With that, he congratulates him on securing such a valuable partner, but he reminds him that he still has enemies out there, like the one who paid to kidnap Primula, so he had better watch his back, and this won't be the last time they hear of Thogalem. Right at that moment, a carriage pulls up, and it's there to deliver a letter addressed to the Viscount. The message comes straight from the royal palace, ordering the Viscount to send Kenishi to the royal capital as soon as possible for an audience with the king. Since it's a royal decree, they don't have the authority to turn down the summons, but no one has any clue why the royal family would be interested in meeting with Kenishi. Thogalem, having overheard everything, bursts into maniacal laughter and tells Kenishi that making himself stand out so much was inevitably going to bring trouble his way sooner or later. As Thogalem rides off, Kenishi starts reflecting on what he said about Primula being kidnapped, and now that he's really thinking it over, what could have been the motive behind it. It was clear that Shaga carried out the kidnapping because a noble paid him, and at first, Kenishi assumed it was just some noble who had fallen for Primula or something along those lines. But maybe there's more to it than that. Thunberja might have used his influence to help sweep things under the rug. But there's a chance the Spice Syndicate had a hand in the kidnapping. They were likely trying to undermine Mallow's company out of jealousy over all the success he was having selling Kenishi's products. And if that really is how it all went down, then that would mean Kenishi bears some of the responsibility for Primula being kidnapped in the first place. That evening, Kenishi sits down with Primula and Mallow for a conversation and informs them that he wants to pause selling goods to them for the time being. He lays out his entire theory that Mallow is being targeted specifically because he has access to exclusive products and Kenishi doesn't want to be the source of any further trouble for him. Additionally, with Kenishi being summoned by the king, he has no way of knowing what kind of challenges he might face, so he'd prefer not to drag Mallow's company into any potential complications. However, Primula points out to Kenishi that he's mistaken about one thing. He isn't the one causing trouble for them. It's simply the risk that comes with running a profitable business. Kenishi counters by reminding her that she almost lost her life because of those very risks, but Primula is prepared to accept that. She's already resolved to stand by Kenishi's side, and given the power he wields, it was inevitable that the royal family would eventually take notice of him. No matter what happens, she wants to keep supporting him through it all. The following day, Crouton's family is finally prepared to relocate to Norseball's lands, so Anemone bids farewell to Mary as the carriage sets off. Once that's done, Kenishi gathers all of his belongings. Initially, he considered ignoring the royal summons and fleeing, but doing so would create a mountain of problems for the Viscount. In the end, he decides to make his way to the royal capital in his vehicle, accompanied by his family. Soon, the group reaches the royal capital, and while it looks quite beautiful, the roads are also incredibly confusing, causing Kenishi to get lost along the way. Eventually, he happens upon a group of castle guards, so he presents them with the letter he received from the king. After roughly an hour, the guards come back, bringing the princess with them. She's thrilled to finally meet the renowned Kenishi, but since it's only been around 2 weeks since they sent the letter to him, they're all surprised that he managed to arrive so fast. The princess's advisors request that he explain how he arrived, so Kenishi tells them he simply drove here on his mechanical beast. After hearing this, the princess immediately starts insisting that he show it to her. Kenishi obliges and summons his jeep. It appears even more impressive than the princess had imagined, so she excitedly asks Kenishi to take her for a ride. He agrees but cautions her that she shouldn't so recklessly get into an unfamiliar vehicle. What would she do if he decided to kidnap her while she was inside? inside. Surprisingly, the princess finds that idea amusing and tells him he can go ahead and kidnap her if he wants to. Still, Kenichi has no intention of becoming a wanted criminal, so he simply drives her back to the castle gates. Once the princess steps out of the car, her advisors immediately begin scolding her for riding in an unfamiliar magical beast like that. If anything had happened to her, the king would have all of them executed, so they plead with her to act more carefully. But the princess just tells them that if they don't like how she acts, they're free to quit. Lilith has taken quite a liking to Kenichi, so she tells him he can call her by her first name, and, since he's been such great company, offers him any reward he'd like. After a moment of thought, Kenichi asks if she'd allow him to set up camp on a small part of the garden grounds. Lilith finds this request a little odd after all. He could simply stay in the castle's guest quarters, but he explains that he has beast folk in his family, and most places don't allow beast folk inside, so he wants to camp outside where they can all stay together. Understanding his reasoning, the princess agrees to let him stay in the garden. Since Kenichi showed up ahead of schedule, it might be a few months before the king is available to meet with him. Kenichi and the group are taken to a section of the garden that they'll be using, and as soon as he summons his house, Lilith gets excited and rushes inside to explore it. Kenichi follows her in and tries to talk her into coming back out, but Lilith has already made up her mind. She says she wants to stay here now. Her advisors argue that she's taking things too far, and Kenichi even asks if she's really certain about this, reminding her that he doesn't have much to offer in terms of hospitality. But Lilith says she's perfectly fine just being able to stay there, she doesn't need anything else from him. If Lilith truly wants to stay, Kenichi sees no reason to stop her, so he goes on with setting up the house and adds the second room. The only thing left now is to build a bathroom, so Kenichi summons his bulldozer and gets ready to start digging. But suddenly, Lilith climbs in and sits on his lap. She's heard a lot about this machine and wants to see how it works firsthand. Kenichi doesn't see any reason to say no, so he operates the bulldozer like usual, and once the job is finished, he gently lifts the princess out of it. No sooner does the princess step out than her knight suddenly draws his sword, shouting at Kenichi for having the audacity to treat the princess with such casual familiarity. Without hesitation, the knight lunges forward, making it clear he fully intends to kill Kenichi. Reacting quickly, Kenichi conjures a shield to deflect the strike and pulls out a crossbow to counterattack. The knight leaps backward to dodge the shot, but Anemone isn't about to let him escape unscathed. After assaulting Kenichi, she hurls a fireball straight at him. Just in time, the royal mage intervenes, blocking the flames, but Anemone is already winding up for another attack. However, before things escalate further, Lilith quickly steps between them and demands they stop fighting. She's genuinely impressed that Anemone can wield magic at such a young age, so she introduces herself properly and asks what other spells Anemone knows. Anemone casually mentions she can also cast explosion magic, a revelation that carries serious weight, because if she had used that earlier, those two would already be dead. Later that evening, Kenichi begins making dinner, and both the princess and her maids are drawn in by how amazing it smells. However, she's unfamiliar with a white grain and asks what it's called. Kenichi tells her it's called rice and offers to get her some bread instead if she's not comfortable trying it, but she says she'd be more than happy to have some rice. When the meal is ready, Kenichi serves her a plate of rice with curry, and she's instantly hooked. She asks if it's common for ordinary people to eat food this delicious, since she's never tasted anything like it before. But Kenichi explains that it's nearly impossible for everyday people to get access to spices, since the spice syndicate keeps driving up the prices. Lilith is already familiar with the syndicate, as they've been a constant pain on the ass for quite some time. She asks Kenichi if he can tell her which spices were used in the dish, but he admits he doesn't know. He tells her he didn't make it himself, but he can give her a can of the spice mix so she can try to recreate it later. The princess takes that as a fun challenge and is more than eager to try and figure out the blend. Meanwhile, Lilith has grown quite fond of the spoon and plate Kenichi let her use for her meal, so she asks if she can purchase them. Kenichi agrees, but first needs to check with Primula. He explains that normally he'd sell the plate for 20 gold and the spoon for 10 gold, but since it's the princess making the purchase, he could probably charge 20 gold for each. He tells Lilith the total will be 40 gold for one plate and one spoon. Surprisingly, Lilith thinks that's a fair price and enthusiastically says she wants to buy them. Kenichi cheerfully hands over the dinner dinnerware, and Lilith is slightly taken aback. She hadn't fully believed him when he claimed to be a merchant. Now convinced, she leans in with a mischievous grin and asks if he deals in anything less than legal. Kenichi neither confirms nor denies it, but he doesn't outright agree to sell her anything either. Meanwhile, during their conversation, Anemone has been growing more and more irritated by how chummy Kenichi and Lilith are getting. Unable to hold back any longer, she wedges herself firmly between the two of them. Lilith is confused by Anemone's jealousy after all. She had assumed Anemone was Kenichi's actual daughter. While it's true that Kenichi sees Anemone as his child in every way that matters, the two aren't biologically related. Later that night, Kenichi allows Lilith to take a bath while he keeps his distance, not willing to risk getting dragged into another frightening situation. He's also not comfortable with the idea of sleeping in the same room as the princess, so he decides to have Primula and Anemone stay with Lilith, while he sets up camp outside with Naima and Miley. However, during the night, both Naima and Miley suddenly rise, having sensed something unusual coming from the castle. The following morning, Kenichi wakes up bright and early, and just a few minutes later, Lilith wakes up too. She immediately calls for her maids to come and help her get dressed so she can start her day. In the days that followed, Lilith continued to ask Kenichi for various favors, one of which was to deal with the castle's rat problem. So, Kenichi ventured down into the tunnels armed with a massive supply of rat poison and ended up killing over 1,000 rats in one go. On a different day, Lilith arranged an auction for the giant spider corpse stored in Kenichi's item box, and later, she asked Kenichi to pretend to kidnap her just to see if he could actually pull it off. So Kenichi picked her up and climbed the castle walls, proving that he could easily escape with Lilith if he ever chose to. The following day, Lilith decided she wanted to treat Kenichi to something special, so she had her royal chefs prepare a curry dish for him. Despite its unusual green color, the flavor was excellent, prompting Kenichi to praise the chefs for their impressive recreation of the curry spices. Suddenly, Lilith posed a question: did Kenichi have any exotic foods in his item box that her palace cooks couldn't possibly replicate? Taking this as a personal challenge, Kenichi immediately produced an ornate box of premium chocolates from his inventory. The princess tries a piece and is amazed by how sweet it is, so she gives a piece to her head chef Sambak and asks him if he would be able to recreate it. After tasting the chocolate, Sambak admits that he could never create something like this with his current skill level. The following day, Lilith heads out to visit Kenichi the moment her royal obligations are finished. During dinner, Naima and Miley suddenly mention sensing that strange presence again. The maids all appear visibly unsettled, prompting Lilith to clarify that there have long been rumors about the castle being haunted. Given how many lives have been lost defending the royal family, and considering how many of those fallen likely died with unresolved bitterness, it's hardly surprising that at least a few vengeful spirits might linger within these walls. At this stage, the maids are completely terrified of the ghosts, so they ask Lilith to request Kenichi to take care of the situation. Lilith herself isn't particularly concerned about the ghosts, but because her maids are so unsettled, she decides to ask Kenichi if he knows how to get rid of one. Kenichi agrees, but only under the condition that Naima, Miley, and his bobcat are allowed inside the castle, since they're the only ones capable of sensing the ghost. Lilith accepts his terms, but even then, Kenichi still has no clue how he's supposed to fight a ghost to begin with. After doing a bit of searching, Kenichi buys a sprayer and fills it with holy water. As they walk through the halls, Naima and Miley point in a corner and tell Kenichi that they can sense something coming from over there. So he sprays the area with holy water, and they tell him the ghost is gone. Now that this area has been dealt with, Lilith takes Kenichi over to the maids' quarters, since they claim there's a ghost lingering there as well. Once Naima and Miley point out the exact spot where the ghost is, Kenichi sprays it, and the moment he does, all the maids say they no longer feel the ghost's presence. Kenichi isn't entirely convinced whether he's actually banishing ghosts or if it's just a placebo effect, but he continues moving through the castle, spraying holy water anywhere the girls direct him to. The last location is the queen's bedroom, as she's been saying she hasn't been sleeping well. Kenichi feels a little uneasy about being in the queen's private quarters, but since Lilith assures him it's alright, he proceeds with the exorcism. Vel keeps staring at a vase on the desk nearby, so Kenichi picks it up and attempts to spray it, but nothing happens. He then suggests to Lilith that the queen might want to remove this vase, since he can't seem to expel the spirit spirit from it. Lilith expresses her gratitude to Kenichi for his assistance and, as a reward, gives him and Anemone permission to browse any of the magical books in the library, though they're strictly prohibited from taking any books outside. Kenichi has no plans to steal them. Instead, he'll make copies of each one. So, he pulls out a photocopier and begins scanning every page of the books to study later. After 4 hours, they've successfully copied around 35 books. As it's getting late, Kenichi and Anemone finally leave the library. But as soon as they step outside, they find a maid waiting for them. Her responsibility is to ensure that none of the books being extremely valuable have been stolen, so she begins inspecting every shelf. After confirming that all the books are still in place, she allows Kenichi and Anemone to go on their way. Later that night, Kenichi is summoned to a private room with the princess and one of her maids. The princess tells him she wants to reward him and that he's free to do whatever he wants with Malin. At first, Kenichi turns her down, explaining that he already has a wife, but Lilith quickly reminds him that no one ever has to find out. With that, Kenichi gives in, not even minding that Lilith is sitting there watching as he claps her personal maid. They all arrive at the royal court, where the audience looks down upon them, as they believe Kenichi doesn't look like a mage. They also think the king is being too soft because he allowed the beast folk and animals to enter the audience chamber. Kenichi observes the royal family, and he senses hostility from the queen. He introduces himself as a mage from the frontier, and he informs them that he has arrived there because he was summoned by the king. The royal servant informs him that the majesty wants to see his fighting skills, so he must fight the royal court's rising star mage named Melissa. Kenichi finally realizes why the king had gathered so many nobles in the court, and Melissa tells him that she only agreed to fight him because she was told her opponent is an impressive mage from the frontier. But she is surprised since he looks quite ordinary, and she feels he is stupid because he even brought his family. She advises him to run away, and she brings out a lesser dragon, which shocks everyone. But Kenichi summons a giant excavator, surprising her. She believes it's only bigger in size, and it won't be able to compete with her dragon. Kenichi enters his excavator, and she prepares to attack him with her dragon, which worries Lilith, but he easily dodges the attack. However, it eliminates several spectators, but shockingly, no one seems to be bothered about it, which makes Kenichi wonder what's wrong with them. Naima and Miley offer to help Kenichi, and they start attacking the dragon, but they fail to land any real damage on him. Kenichi uses this opportunity to grab and slam the dragon, but he realizes it wasn't enough to finish it. So Anemone tells him to leave it to her. She uses her magic to attack it, but unfortunately, this doesn't work either. The dragon hits the excavator with its tail, which sends it back, and Kenichi loses control over the machine, opening it to all sorts of attacks. The dragon tries to burn them, but luckily, Anemone casts a high protection magic, which saves them, impressing everyone. Naima and Miley once again attack it, and this time Naima manages to hit an arrow in its eyes, which blocks its vision, so it starts launching fire attacks in all directions, placing everyone in danger. It rushes towards the excavator and uses its brute force to push it back, which makes everyone think that the fight is practically over, and Melissa will easily win it. But Anemone once again surprises everyone as she starts preparing a golem using her magic. However, instead of creating a fully developed golem, she only creates a hand, which disappoints everyone. But shockingly, it still manages to grab the dragon and toss it like it weighs nothing. Kenichi knows it wasn't enough to defeat the dragon, but he still thinks it's enough opening for him to use his final move. He starts rotating the excavator, hitting the dragon multiple times before finishing it with a strong final blow, which defies all absurdity. Everyone is amazed at their victory, and Kenichi thanks Anemone for the help. But he notices she's bleeding as she is exhausted from using all her mana. He takes out a loudspeaker and thanks His Majesty for inviting him to such a wonderful show in the royal chamber. However, he is angry since it placed his family in danger, so he says he will use his mighty summoned beast to collapse the entire audience chamber and escape, after which he will use all his energy to destroy this country. They think he is being overconfident after defeating just a lesser dragon, and even Kenichi himself realizes realizes he went a little too far in his range. Primula calls him from behind, and he apologizes for overreacting as it places all of them in danger, but she reminds him that she will follow him no matter what he decides. Naimna also tells him that the beast folk are naturally drawn to strong men, and Anemone also reminds him of his promise to go adventuring together. Kenichi feels grateful to have all their support, but he mentions if they run away now, they will never know peace again, and also he fears the trouble it may cause for Mallow and others. She assures him that neither she nor her father will blame him if anything happens to her or the trading company. Princess Lilith suddenly comes down along with her guards, and she says that she understands how he must be angry, as his family was in danger, but if he runs away from there, he might be giving up on the peaceful life he seeks, for which even the nobles will start hating him. She notes that she has a better idea to settle this problem, and he wonders what that is. So she reveals that he can marry her, but he quickly rejects her proposal, which breaks her heart as she thinks he could have at least given it a thought. He tells her that he can't be just another pawn in the royals' games, so Lilith mentions that in that case, she has a small request as a young girl, which he should grant. Kenichi asks her what she wants, so she reveals that her birthday is coming soon, so he should get her a present. She tells him that if she likes the gift, she will ask her father to forgive him and grant a document that will declare that they have no grudges against him. He realizes she wants him to gift her something that no other noble can have, and she mentions that it will be almost impossible to surprise her with jewelry, but he considers it a challenge, so Kenichi starts thinking about what to give her. Primula tells him that all his products are wonderful due to the skill involved in making them, but she is most surprised by how he can create things which look exactly the same in size and shape, so she suggests he should give her a similar gift. Kenichi gives Lilith a beautiful pearl necklace, which shocks her, and he wonders if she has never seen a pearl necklace, but she notes that she has seen one, but not with such big beads that two in the same shape and color. She is very happy and shows it to her father, but the queen feels very jealous. Lilith hands him the document, which notes that he's officially forgiven for all his mistakes, and he thanks her, but he thinks that although this isn't the ideal scenario, he is happy they could achieve peace. The queen suddenly arrives there, and he senses she is even more terrifying than that dragon he faced earlier. She asks him if he has anything for her, so he notes it was a present for Lilith's birthday. She mentions that her birthday is also arriving soon, so he remembers how Lilith told him that her mother can prove to be a nightmare when she is mad. He apologizes to her and presents her with a pearl necklace, which makes her very happy, so she notes she can't accept such a gift for nothing, so she gives him the key to her bedroom. Kenichi wonders if all the nobles in their world believe that if they can't buy something with money, they can use their bodies. He notices the king isn't happy with it, and Lilith thinks the queen shouldn't joke with him, and he agrees with her, but the queen tells him to call her by her name just like he calls Lilith. He makes an excuse that it's because this is their first meeting, so he asks her for her name, and she tells him it's Amara. Kenichi asks her if she has any old unused furniture in the palace, and she says yes, but she wonders why he is asking this, so Kenichi reveals that he would prefer that over this key. They soon enter the royal storage room, and Kenichi is impressed as everything there is very valuable, but Lady Amara asks him to take a desk as it belonged to her when she was a child, and it reminds her of those bad days, which she wants to forget. He takes the table, and seeing how easily he did that, she jokingly asks if he can take her with him, which Lilith finds crazy. Kenichi thinks that this is the real antique furniture used by the royal family, and in his world, it would have been stored in some museum. While walking, they come across the vase, and she mentions that thanks to him, she is enjoying peaceful sleep. He is glad to hear it and asks if she is sure that it was responsible for her lack of sleep. So she reveals that when they questioned the noble who gave it to her, he confessed that he knew it was cursed, yet he gave it to her. Kenichi wonders why someone could do this, so she reveals it was obviously done to kill her. She tells him that the one who wanted to kill her was part of the men whom the lesser dragon killed earlier during their fight. He wonders if she did it intentionally to take her revenge strange, but she tells him that it was just a coincidence that people were burned to death because of the dragon's fire breath. She tells him that the man was part of the anti-royal faction, which opposes their rule, and she adds that lately the actions of Thunberja have caused great trouble. She notes that he is the lowest rank of the anti-royal faction, and she has heard he is conducting all sorts of schemes to take over his neighbor, Astrantia, such as sending his pawn merchant Thogalon. She tells him that the anti-royal faction also has numerous thugs and bandits as its pawns, and in addition to Astrantia, they have also been trying to take control of Dahlia. She knows he is the one who defeated the bandits hiding out in the old castle near Dahlia. He is surprised by her knowledge, but she notes that a good ruler must always be well informed. She tells him that because of that incident, they have managed to slow the anti-royal faction's expansion, so he has their gratitude, but he finds her very scary. Meanwhile, Melissa asks Anemone where she learned to use that high protection spell, and she reveals it was from a grimoire which she believes belonged to someone named Armeria, which shocks Melissa. So Anemone wonders if she knew her. She mentions that she was a famous witch, and she asks Anemone about her mother, but she does not know much about her, and all she knows is that she is dead. Melissa reads the message written in the book, and we learn that the grimoire was left to Anemone by her mother, so Melissa tells her to treasure it as it's a memento. She leaves after telling them that she will return one day and she won't lose the next time they fight. After a few days, Kenishi was rewarded with the land at a still lakefront. Since land had been granted to him, he could no longer remain a commoner, so the king bestowed upon him the title of Baron, making him one of the nobles of the kingdom. He also purchased a van, as their group had grown larger after Lady Lilith threatened to leave the royal family if she wasn't allowed to accompany Kenishi. The king permitted her to go under the pretense that she would be monitoring him. She explained that she couldn't risk allowing such a powerful mage to join the anti-royal faction, so she needed to keep an eye on him. Malin also joined them, as she serves as the princess's attendant. Fayu is surprised to see the van, and when he learns that Kenishi has become a noble now, he apologizes for his earlier rudeness, but he tells him it's alright. Later that night, back at the house, everyone is sitting around the table enjoying dinner. Lilith asks Kenishi if what they're eating is mayonnaise. Now that she mentions it, Kenishi suddenly remembers hearing a rumor about a mage in another empire who also invented mayonnaise, and he finds himself wondering when he'll finally meet that mayonnaise guy. That was it for this anime. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss more recaps.